first presidential debate. Live from Hofstra University in Hempstead, New York. Here now, Savannah Guthrie and Chuck Todd.
And good evening, everybody. Nice to have you with us, Chuck. After all the hype, all the prep, all the pre-debate gamesmanship from both campaigns, this is it. We are literally just minutes away now from the start of this first and all-important presidential debate on the stage behind us. We've already seen the candidates tonight. Hillary and Donald Trump each arriving here a bit earlier this evening. They're waiting backstage. And Chuck, we've had a moment tonight. Hillary in the House and met Mrs. Melania Trump, and they just shared that handshake. We've got the whole family assembled here.
We do. I think one thing we got to remember, as big of personalities as they are, we know this is going to be a clash of big personalities. This is also a clash of two competing visions of America.
Let's bring in our colleague Tom Brokaw, obviously somebody who's watched a lot of debates, but doesn't this feel like there's something special about this one, if nothing else, because they think maybe 100 million people could be watching.
I've never seen one quite like this, in part because
she has presence. She's very confident. I'm waiting for her to say something like, I fully intend on winning this election. That's one of the lines that she gets, that sort of sparkler in her eye when she says it, with conviction. She's not in the race just to raise her profile. She's here to win.
Which is interesting because I think she's someone who could actually stand to gain tonight.
Yeah,
she's someone who people are watching.
I expect her to do very, very well. I mean, to the points that Zerlina made, every single time we've seen her in a setting where she's debating someone or she's questioning someone, she stands out the most. And I think what's interesting about Kamala is when you think about black women. Black women seeing Kamala Harris as someone who empowers them. That's very, very important. And we
to a very
cannot
important
underestimate
voting bloc.
that. Absolutely.
Right.
I wouldn't underestimate it.
And just finally, one thing that we've heard a lot from voters, but that we didn't touch on tonight, was the economy. I mean, something we heard from the other candidates last night was their intention to show how an economic plan under a Democratic president could beat that of Trump's. How could the candidates tonight do that?
Well, that's where I think Biden, again, has some explaining to do. You know, he did make those remarks that were obviously widely criticized and picked up about working with segregationist Democrats. But during those same remarks, he also said that nothing would change for this group of wealthy donors, that things would be exactly the same. And a lot of people took that to interpret that they wouldn't be paying more money, they wouldn't be subject to a wealth tax that a lot of the other candidates are pushing for. And that's where I think someone like Bernie Sanders has the opportunity to shine, at least in a certain age group, potentially, because again, he does have this multifaceted approach to building the economy with his student debt plan, with his wealth tax, and I think that he is unparalleled on the stage in terms of offering that spectrum of policies.
With less than 1 minute to go until these candidates, they are already on the stage, but when they begin, strategically, do you think it's going to be more important for the candidates to address perhaps some of their shortcomings or the evolution of their ideas, or do you think it's going to be more important for them to begin with a brand new plan for America?
I think they need to show how they're better than Donald Trump and how they can defeat him. Simple.
So tonight is about Trump. All right, guys, thank you so much. And this is the moment we've been waiting for. We are about to see the candidates take the stage. Stay right here because we are headed straight to Miami.
And folks, if you are with me now and hearing this is the live Democratic National Debate. It is the second day in a row. I am Keith Landy, the Happy Healer, and welcome to my version of the debate. I'm also a presidential candidate on the Democratic side. So we're getting things started off. They're back, and I'm going to transition it back over.
Tonight, we heard from 10 candidates, and now 10 more take the stage.
And again tonight, we'll be joined to the questioning by our colleagues, Jose Diaz-Balart, Chuck Todd, and Rachel Maddow.
The candidates are in position, so let's get started.
Tonight, round 2, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, former Vice President Joe Biden, South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, California Senator Kamala Harris, former Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, California Congressman Eric Swalwell, author Marianne Williamson, and former tech executive Andrew Yang. From NBC News, Decision 2020, the Democratic Candidates Debate. Live from the Adrian Arzt Performing Arts Center in Miami, Florida.
Across America tonight, we continue this spirited debate about the future of the country, how to tackle our most pressing problems, and getting to the heart of the biggest issues in this Democratic primary.
Tonight we're going to talk about healthcare, immigration. We're also going to dive into the economy, jobs, climate change as well.
And some quick rules of the road before we begin, and they may sound familiar. 20 candidates qualified for this first debate. As we said, we heard from 10 last night, and we'll hear from 10 more tonight. The breakdown for each night was selected at random. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer, 30 seconds for any follow-ups.
And because of the large field of candidates, not every person is going to be able to weigh in on every topic. But over the course of the next 2 hours, we will hear from everyone.
And we love our audience, but we'd like to ask them to keep their reactions to a minimum, and we're not going to hold back in making sure the candidates stick to time. So with that business taken care of, let's get to it. And we're going to start today with Senator Sanders. Good evening to you. You've called for big new government benefits like universal health care and free college. In a recent interview, you said you suspected that Americans would be, quote, delighted to pay more taxes for things like that. My question to you is, will taxes go up for the middle class in a Sanders administration? And if so, how do you sell that to voters?
Well, you're quite right. We have a new vision for America. And at a time when we have 3 people in this country owning more wealth than the bottom half of America, while 500,000 people are sleeping out on the streets today, we think it is time for change, real change. And by that I mean that health care, in my view, is a human right. And we have got to pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. Under that system, by the way, vast majority of the people in this country will be paying significantly less for health care than they are right now. I believe that education is the future for this country. And that is why I believe that we must make public colleges and universities tuition free and eliminate student debt. And we do that by placing a tax on Wall Street. Every proposal that I have brought forth is fully paid for.
Senator Sanders, I'll give you 10 seconds just to answer the very direct question. Will you raise taxes for the middle class in a Sanders administration?
People who have health care under Medicare for all will have no premiums, no deductibles, no co-payments, no out-of-pocket expenses. Yes, they will pay more in taxes, but less in health care for what they get.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Bennett, we're going to get to everybody, I promise, but let me just, Senator Biden, promise, everybody's going to get in here, promise. Vice President Biden, Senator Sanders, as you know, has been calling for a revolution. Recently, in remarks to a group of wealthy donors, as you were speaking about the problem of income inequality in this country, you said, we shouldn't, quote, demonize the rich. You said, nobody has to be punished. No one's standard of living would change. Nothing would fundamentally change. What did you mean by that?
What I meant by that is, look, Donald Trump thinks Wall Street built America. Ordinary middle-class Americans build America. My dad used to have an expression. He said, Joe, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's being able to look your kid in the eye and say everything's going to be okay. Too many people who are in the middle class and poor have at the bottom fall out under this proposal. What I'm saying is that we've got to be straightforward. We have to make sure we understand that to return dignity to the middle class, they have to have insurance that is covered and they can afford it. They have to make sure that we're in a situation where there's continuing education and they're able to pay for it. And they have to make sure that they're able to breathe air that is clean and they have water that they can drink. Look, Donald Trump has put us in a horrible situation. We do have enormous income inequality. And the one thing I agree on is we can make massive cuts in the $1.6 trillion in tax loopholes out there, and I would be going about eliminating Donald Trump's tax cuts for the wealthy.
Vice President Biden, thank you. Senator Harris. There's a lot of talk in this primary about new government benefits, such as student loan cancellation, free college, health care, and more. Do you think that Democrats have a responsibility to explain how they will pay for every proposal they make along those lines?
Well, let me tell you something. I hear that question, but where was that question when the Republicans and Donald Trump passed a tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations in this country, contributing at least $1 trillion to the debt of America, which middle-class families will pay for one way or another? Working families need support and need to be lifted up, and frankly, this economy is not working for working people. For too long, the rules have been written in the favor of the people who have the most and not in favor of the people who work the most, which is why I am proposing that we change the tax code. So for every family that is making less than $100,000 a year, they will receive a tax credit that they can collect up to $500 a month, which will make all the difference between those families being able to get through the end of the month with dignity and with support or not. And on day one, I will repeal that tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America.
Senator Harris, thank you. Governor Hickenlooper, let me get you in on this. You've warned that Democrats will lose in 2020 if they embrace socialism, as you put it. You were booed at the California Democratic Convention when you said that. Only one candidate on this stage, Senator Sanders, identifies himself as a democratic socialist. What are the policies or positions of your opponents that you think are veering towards socialism?
Well, I think that the bottom line is if we don't clearly define that we are not socialists, the Republicans are going to come at us every way they can and call us socialists. And if you look at the Green New Deal, which I admire the sense of urgency and how important it is to do climate change, I'm a scientist, but we can't promise every American a government job. If you want to get universal health care coverage, I believe that health care is a right and not a privilege. But you can't expect to eliminate private insurance for 180 million people, many of whom don't want to give it up. In Colorado, we brought businesses and nonprofits together. We got near universal health care coverage. We were the first state in America to bring the environmental community and the oil and gas industry to aggressively address methane emissions. And we were also the first place to expand reproductive rights on a scale basis, and we reduced teen pregnancy by 54%. We've done the big progressive things that people said couldn't be done. I've done what pretty much everyone else up here is still talking about doing.
Governor, thank you. Senator Sanders, I'll give you a chance to weigh in here. What is your response to those who say nominating a socialist would re-elect Donald Trump?
Well, I think the responses at the polls, last poll I saw had us 10 points ahead of Donald Trump, because the American people understand that Trump is a phony, that Trump is a pathological liar and a racist, and that he lied to the American people during his campaign. He said he was going to stand up for working families. Well, President Trump, you're not standing up for working families when you try to throw 32 million people off the health care that they have, and that 83% of your tax benefits go to the top 1%. That's how we beat Trump. We expose him for the fraud that he is.
Both their perspectives. The debate we're having in our party right now is confusing because the truth is there's a big difference between capitalism on the one hand and greed on the other. And so all the things that we're trying to change is when companies care more about profits when they do about people. So if you're talking about ending gun violence, it's the greed of the NRA and the gun manufacturers that make any progress impossible. It's the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies when we want to try to get health care as a right and not a privilege. So there need not be disagreement in the party because in truth, we want healthy capitalism.
Thank you.
We don't want corrupted capitalism.
Thank you. I want to be fair to all the candidates. Thank you. Senator Bennett, you have said, quote, it's possible to write policy proposals that have no basis in reality. You might as well call them candy. Were you referring to any candidate or proposal in particular when you said that?
Was that directed to me?
Yes, that was your quote.
That sounded like me. Thank you.
It was you.
I appreciate it. Well, look, first of all, I agree completely with Bernie about what the fundamental challenge we're facing as a country is. 40 years of no economic growth for 90% of the American people. 160,000 families in the top 0.1% have the same wealth as the bottom 90%, and we've got the worst income inequality that we've had in 100 years. Where I disagree is on his solution on Medicare for all. I have proposed getting to universal health care, which we need to do. It is a right. Health care is a right. We need to get to universal health care. I believe the way to do that is by finishing the work we started with Obamacare and creating a public option that every family and every person in America can make a choice for their family about whether they want a public option, which for them would be like having Medicare for all, or whether they want to keep their private insurance. I believe we will get there much more quickly if we do that.
But wait,
Bernie, if I could just finish, Bernie mentioned that the taxes that we would have to pay, because of those taxes, Vermont rejected Medicare for all.
Senator,
in Bernie's bill,
we are going to talk about health care at length, Senator, but for the moment, my colleague will say, once I continue the question
I wrote
on
the
the
part
economy.
in Senator Sanders' bill. I wrote the part in Senator Sanders' bill that is the transition, which merges what the two senators said.
Senator.
Because the truth is, if you have a buy-in over a 4 or 5 year period, you move us to single payer more quickly.
Senator, we will get to this. We will get to this. Before we do, I want to say hello and good evening, buenas noches to Mayor Buttigieg.
Buenas noches, gracias de invitarnos.
Gusto en verlo, caballero. Many of your colleagues on stage support free college. You do not. Why not?
Sure, so college affordability is personal for us. Chasten and I have 6-figure student debt. I believe in reducing student debt. It's logical to me that if you can refinance your house, you ought to be able to refinance your student debt. I also believe in free college for low and middle income students for whom cost could be a barrier. I just don't believe it makes sense to ask working class families to subsidize even the children of billionaires. I think the children of the wealthiest Americans can pay at least a little bit of tuition, and while I want tuition costs to go down, I don't think we can buy down every last penny for them. Now, there's something else that doesn't get talked about in the college affordability debate. Yes, it needs to be more affordable in this country to go to college. It also needs to be more affordable in this country to not go to college. You should be able to live well, afford rent, be generous to your church and Little League, whether you went to college or not. That's one of many reasons we need to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
Jose, I've got $100,000 in student loan debt myself.
Let me get to you.
We can't count on the people who've been in government for the last 30 years, who were around when this problem was created, to be the ones to solve it. It's going to be the next generation, the 40 million of us who can't start a family, can't take a good idea and start a business, and can't buy our first home. This is the generation that's going to be able to solve student loan debt. This generation is ready to lead.
Mr. Yang, your signature policy is to give every adult in the United States $1,000 a month, no questions asked.
That's right.
I think that's like $3.2 trillion a year. How would you do that?
Sorry?
How would you do that?
Oh, so it's difficult to do if you have companies like Amazon, trillion-dollar tech companies paying literally zero in taxes while they're closing 30% of our stores. Now, we need to put the American people in position to benefit from all these innovations in other parts of the economy. And if we had a value-added tax at even half the European level, it would generate over $800 billion in new revenue, which combined with the money in our hands, it would be the trickle-up economy from our people, families, and communities up. We would spend the money and it would circulate through our regional economies and neighborhoods, creating millions of jobs, making our families stronger and healthier. We'd save money on things like incarceration, homelessness services, emergency room health care, and just the value gains from having a stronger, healthier, mentally healthier population would increase GDP by $700 billion. This is the move that we have to make, particularly as technology is now automating away millions of American jobs. It's why Donald Trump is our president today, that we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And we're about to do the same thing to millions of retail jobs, call center jobs, fast food jobs, truck driving jobs, and on through the economy.
Sir, if I get you understand a little bit better, so you're saying $1,000 a month for everyone over 18, but a value-added tax, so you can spend that $1,000 on value-added tax?
Well, the value-added tax would end up, you'd still be increasing the buying power of the bottom 94% of Americans. You have to spend a lot of money for a mild value-added tax to eat up $12,000 a year per individual. So for the average family with 2 or 3 adults, it'd be $24,000 to $36,000 a year.
Okay, Congressman Sewell, I want to talk a little bit about what Mr. Yang is talking about, and you just actually mentioned it. Many Americans are worried that things like self-driving cars, robots, drones, artificial intelligence will cost them their jobs. What would you do to help people get the skills they need to adapt to this new world?
We must always be a country where technology creates more jobs than it displaces. And I've seen the anxiety across America where the manufacturing floors go from 1,000 to 100 to 1. So we have to modernize our schools, value the teachers who prepare our kids, wipe the student debt from any teacher that goes into a community that needs it, invest in America's communities, especially where places where the best exports are people who move away to get skills. But Jose, I was 6 years old when a presidential candidate came to the California Democratic Convention and said, it's time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans. That candidate was then Senator Joe Biden. Joe Biden was right when he said it was time to pass the torch to a new generation of Americans 32 years ago. He's still right today. If we're going to solve the issues of automation, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issues of climate chaos, pass the torch. If we're going to solve the issue of student loan debt, pass the torch. If we're going to end gun violence for families who are fearful of sending their kids to school, pass the torch.
Vice President, would you like to sing a torch song?
I would. I'm still holding on to that torch. I want to make it clear to you, look, the fact of the matter is what we have to do is make sure that everybody is prepared better to go on to educate for an education. The fact is that's why I propose us focusing on schools that are in distress. That's why I think we should triple the amount of money we spend for Title I schools. That's why I think we should have universal pre-K. That's why I think every single person who graduates from high school, 65 out of 100 now, need something beyond high school. And we should provide for them to be able to get that education. That's why there should be free community college, cutting in half the cost of college. That's why we should be in a position where we do not have anyone have to pay back a student debt when they get out. They're making less than $25,000 a year. Their debt is frozen, no interest payment until they get beyond that. We can't put people in a position where they aren't able to go on and move on. And so, folks, there's a lot we can do, but we have to make continuing education available for everyone so that everyone can compete in the 21st century. We're not doing that now.
Senator Sanders.
As the youngest guy on the stage, I feel like I probably ought to contribute to the generation.
As part of Joe's generation,
I'm all for
part of Joe's generation, let me respond.
Before we move
The
on
issue, if I may say, is not generational.
Please.
The
Senator
issue
Sanders,
is not generational. The issue is who has the guts to take on Wall Street, to take on the fossil fuel industry, to take on the big money interests who have unbelievable influence over the economic and political life of this country.
These issues
Senator Harris, I'm so sorry. We will let all of you speak. Senator Harris. Senator Harris. Please, we will let you all speak. Senator Harris.
We can't afford to wait for evolution on these issues.
Hey guys, you know what? America does not want to witness a food fight. They want to know how we're going to put food on their table. Part of the issue that is at play in America today, and we've all been traveling around the country, I certainly have, I'm meeting people who are working 2 and 3 jobs. You know, this president walks around talking about and flouting his great economy, right? My great economy, my great economy. You ask him, well, how are you measuring this greatness of this economy of yours? And he talks about the stock market. Well, that's fine if you own stocks. So many families in America do not. You ask them, how are you measuring the greatness of this economy of yours? And they point to the jobless numbers and the unemployment numbers. Well, yeah, people in America are working. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. So when we talk about jobs, let's be really clear. In our America, no one should have to work more than 1 job to have a roof over their head and food on the table.
Thank you very much.
We've all expressed an interest in talking about healthcare. So let's talk about healthcare. And this is going to be a show of hands question. We asked a question about healthcare last night that spurred a lot of discussion, as you know. We're going to do it again now. Many people watching at home have health insurance of their employer. Who here would abolish their private health insurance in favor of a government-run plan? All right. Kristen Gillibrand, Senator Gillibrand.
Yeah, so no, it's my turn.
Go ahead.
So this is a very important issue. So the plan that Senator Sanders and I and others support, Medicare for All, is how you get to single payer. but it has a buy-in transition period, which is really important. In 2005, when I ran for Congress in a 2-to-1 Republican district, I actually ran on Medicare for All, and I won that 2-to-1 Republican district twice. And the way I formulated it was simple. Anyone who doesn't have access to insurance they like, they could buy in at a percentage of income they could afford. So that's what we put into the transition period for our Medicare for All plan. I believe we need to get to universal health care as a right and not a privilege to single payer. The quickest way you get there is you create competition with the insurers. God bless the insurers. If they want to compete, they can certainly try. But they've never put people over their profits, and I doubt they ever will. So what will happen is people will choose Medicare, you will transition, we will get to Medicare for All, and then your step to single payer is so short. I would make it an earned benefit, just like Social Security, so that you buy in your whole life, it is always there for you, and it's permanent and it's universal.
Senator, your time's out. I'm going to put that same question to Mayor Buttigieg.
Yeah, we've taught, look, everybody who says Medicare for All, every person in politics who allows that phrase to escape their lips, has a responsibility to explain how you're actually supposed to get from here to there. Now, here's how I would do it. It's very similar. I would call it Medicare for all who want it. You take something like Medicare, a flavor of that, you make it available on the exchanges, people can buy in, and then if people like us are right, that will be not only a more inclusive plan, but a more efficient plan than any of the corporate answers out there, then it will be a very natural glide path to the single-payer environment. But let's remember, even in countries that have outright socialized medicine, like England, even there's still a private sector. That's fine. It's just that for our primary care, we can't be relying on the tender mercies of the corporate system. This one's very personal for me. I started out this year dealing with the terminal illness of my father. I make decisions for a living. And nothing could have prepared me for the kind of decisions our family faced. But the thing we had going for us was that we never had to make those decisions based on whether it was going to bankrupt our family because of Medicare. And I want every family to have that same freedom to do what is medically right, not live in financial fear.
Your time is complete. Vice President Biden, I want to put the question to you. You were one of the architects of Obamacare. So where do we go from here?
Look, this is very personal to me. When my wife and daughter were killed in an automobile accident, my two boys were really very badly injured. I couldn't imagine what it'd be like had I not had adequate health care available immediately. And then when my son came home from Iraq after a year, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and he was given months to live. I can't fathom what would have happened if, in fact, they said, by the way, the last 6 months of your life, you're on your own. We're cutting off. You've used up your time. The fact of the matter is that the quickest, fastest way to do it is build on Obamacare, to build on what we did. And secondly, to make sure that everyone does have an option. Everyone, whether they have private insurance, employer insurance, or no insurance, they, in fact, can buy in the exchange to a Medicare-like plan. And the way to do that, we can do it quickly. Look, urgency matters. There's people right now facing what I faced and what we faced without any of the help I had. We must move now. I'm against any Democrat who opposes, that takes down Obamacare, and any Republican who wants to get rid of it.
Let me turn to Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders, you basically want to scrap the private health insurance system as we know it and replace it with a government-run plan. None of the states that have tried something like that, California, Vermont, New York, has struggled with it, have been successful. If politicians can't make it work in those states, how would you implement it on a national level? How does this work?
Listen, I find it hard to believe that every other major country on earth, including my neighbor 50 miles north of me, Canada, somehow has figured out a way to provide health care to every man, woman, and child, and in most cases, they're spending 50% per capita what we are spending. Let's be clear. Let us be very clear. The function of health care today, from the insurance and drug company perspective, is not to provide quality care to all in a cost-effective way. The function of the healthcare system today is to make billions in profits for the insurance companies. And last year, if you could believe it, while we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and I will lower prescription drug prices in half in this country, top 10 companies made $69 billion in profit. They will spend hundreds of millions of dollars lying to the American people, telling us why we cannot have a Medicare for all single-payer
I just have to follow up there. How do you implement it on a national
I'm
level?
sorry?
How do you implement it on a national
yes.
level, given the fact it's not succeeded and other states have tried?
I will tell you how we'll do it. We'll do it the way real change has always taken place, whether it was the labor movement, the civil rights movement, or the women's movement. We will have Medicare for all, when tens of millions of people are prepared to stand up and tell the insurance companies and the drug companies that their day is gone, that health care is a human right, not something to make huge profits off.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Williamson. Ms. Williamson, this is a question for you. We've been excuse me, I'm addressing the question, Ms. Williamson. We've been talking a lot about access to health insurance, but for many Americans, their most pressing concern is the high cost of health care. How would you lower the cost of prescription drugs?
Well, first of all, the government should never have made the deal with the big pharma that they couldn't negotiate. That was just part of the regular corruption by which multinational corporations have their way with us. You know, I want to say that while I agree with, I'm with Senator Bennett and others, but I agree with almost everything here. I'll tell you one thing. It's really nice that we've got all these plans, but if you think we're going to beat Donald Trump by just having all these plans, you got another thing coming. Because he didn't win by saying he had a plan. He won by simply saying, make America great again. We've got to get deeper than just these superficial fixes, as important as they are. Even if we're just talking about the superficial fixes, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a health care system in the United States. We have a sickness care system in the United States. We just wait till somebody gets sick, and then we talk about who's going to pay for the treatment and how they're going to be treated. What we need to talk about is why so many Americans have unnecessary chronic illnesses, so many more compared to other countries. And that gets back into not just the big pharma, not just health insurance companies. It has to do with chemical policies. It has to do with environmental policies. It has to do with food policies. It has to do with drug policies. It has to do with environmental
Senator Bennett, a question for you. You want to keep the system that we have in place with Obamacare and Build Out. You mentioned that a moment ago. Is that enough to get us to universal coverage?
I believe that will get us the quickest way there. And I thought the Vice President was very moving about this, and Mayor Pete as well. I had prostate cancer recently, as you may know, and it's why I was a little late getting in the race. The same week, my kid had her appendectomy out. And I feel very strongly that families ought to be able to have this choice. I think that's what the American people want. I believe it will get us there quickly. There are millions of people in America that do not have health insurance today because they can't, they're too wealthy. They make too much money to be on Medicaid. They can't afford health insurance. When Senator Sanders says that Canada is single payer, there are 35 million people in Canada. There are 330 million people in the United States, easily the number of people on a public option. It could easily be 35 million. And for them, it would be Medicare for all, as Mayor Buttigieg says. But for others that want to keep it, they should be able to keep it. And I think that will be the fastest way to get where we need to go. Also, I will say, Bernie is a very honest person. He has said over and over again, unlike others that have supported this legislation, over and over again, that this will make illegal all insurance except cosmetic, except insurance for, I guess that's for plastic surgery. Everything else is banned under the Medicare for all proposal that he has put forward.
I'd let you go a little longer there, but obviously, Senator Sanders, you get a response. Senator Sanders,
just very briefly. You know, Mike, Medicare is the most popular health insurance program in the country. People don't like their private insurance companies. They like their doctors and hospitals. Under our plan, people go to any doctor they want, any hospital they want. We will substantially lower the cost of health care in this country because we'll stop the greed of the insurance companies.
On this issue, we have to think about how this affects real people. And the reality of how this affects real people is captured in a story that many of us heard, and I will paraphrase. There is, any night in America, a parent who's seeing that their child has a temperature that is out of control, calls 911, what should I do? And they say, take the child to the emergency room. And so they get in their car and they drive, and they're sitting in the parking lot outside of the emergency room looking at those sliding glass doors while they have the hand on the forehead of their child, knowing that if they walk through those sliding glass doors, even though they have insurance, They will be out of $5,000 deductible when they walk through those doors. That's what insurance companies are doing in America today.
We're going to continue this discussion. I want us to put it in a different myth about candidates, please. Candidates, please.
I'm one of those parents. I was just in the emergency room, and I'm telling
Congressman, thank you.
We fight health insurance companies every single week. We stand in line and pay expensive prescription drugs. We have to have a health care guarantee. If you're sick, you're seen, and in America, you never go broke because of it.
Okay. A lot of you have been talking tonight about these government health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay. Let me start with you, Mayor Buttigieg. Why? Mayor Buttigieg, why?
Because our country is healthier when everybody is healthier. And remember, we're talking about something people are given a chance to buy into. In the same way that there are undocumented immigrants in my community who pay. They pay sales taxes. They pay property taxes directly or indirectly. This is not about a handout. This is an insurance program. And we do ourselves no favors by having 11 million undocumented people in our country be unable to access health care. But of course, the real problem is we shouldn't have 11 million undocumented people with no pathway to citizenship. It makes no sense. And the American people agree on what to do. This is the crazy thing. If leadership consists of forming a consensus around a divisive issue, this White House has divided us around a consensus issue. The American people want a pathway to citizenship. They want protections for dreamers. We need to clean up the lawful immigration system, like how my father immigrated to this country. And as part of a compromise, we can do whatever common sense measures are needed at the border. But Washington can't deliver on something the American people want. What does that tell you about the system we're living in? It tells you it needs profound structural reform.
Vice President Biden, I believe you said that your health care plan would not cover undocumented immigrants. Could you explain your position?
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
I believe at the show of hands you did not raise your hand. Did you raise your hand?
No, I did.
Okay, sorry. So you said they would be covered under your plan, which is different than Obamacare.
Yes, but here's the thing.
Can you explain that change?
Yes. You cannot let, as the mayor said, you cannot let people who are sick, no matter where they come from, no matter what their status, go uncovered. You can't do that. It's just going to be taken care of, period. You have to. It's a humane thing to do. But here's the deal. The deal is that he's right about three things. Number one, they, in fact, contribute to the well-being of the country, but they also, for example, they've increased the lifespan of Social Security because they have a job, they're paying a Social Security tax. That's what they're doing. It's increased the lifespan. They would do the same thing in terms of reducing the overall cost of health care by them being able to be treated and not wait till they're in extremis. The other thing is, folks, look, we can deal with these insurance companies. We can deal with the insurance companies by, number one, putting insurance executives in jail for their misleading advertising, what they're doing on opioids, what they're doing paying doctors to prescribe. We could be doing this by making sure everyone who is on Medicare, that the government should be able to negotiate the price for whatever the drug costs are. We can do this by making sure that we're in a position that we in fact allow people. Time's up.
I just want to address that point.
Actually, hold off a minute. We need to take a short break here. We got a lot more we need to talk to all of you about, so stick with us. We're just getting started. We'll be back with more from Miami right after this.
Okay, folks, that's great. It's coming along well. I'm your happy healer for president, by the way, so while it's breaking, I'll just go ahead and talk to you a little bit and fill in on some of my own thoughts about the different subjects that we are witnessing right before our eyes. And, you know, I wish I was there, to be honest. What a great opportunity it would be for the average American, because that's how I view myself, as the people's candidate. I'm much like you. I'm just living the life that they are presenting to us. They are our lawmakers. We count on them to do their jobs. Many of us are just apolitical. We don't want that hate or division in our lives. We're focused on love. We're focused on each other. and we're focused on our passions, and we just want to know that the world's going to be okay. And quite frankly, well, now that it's infested our lives, many of us too are also discombobulated, and we want change. We want a loving world where we can really do the things that the people are so mad about. We have 27 seconds until it goes live, and I'll put you right back. And that's what people are so angry about and pushing for and wanting and clamoring for. And so in my campaign, I have virtually addressed all of those issues. And I say, don't be an 8-second warrior. Listen to what I have to say too. Okay, so we're going to put them back now.
In this round.
Thank you very much. Senator Harris, last month, more than 130,000 migrants were apprehended at the southern border. Many of them are being detained, including small children, in private detention centers in Florida and throughout our country. Most of the candidates on this stage say the conditions at these facilities are abhorrent. On January 20th, 2021, if you are president, what specifically would you do with the thousands of people who try to reach the United States every day and want a better life through asylum?
Immediately on January 20th of 2021, I will, first of all, we cannot forget our DACA recipients, and so I'm going to start there. I will immediately, by executive action, reinstate DACA status and DACA protection to those young people. I will further extend protection for deferral of deportation for their parents and for veterans, who we have so many who are undocumented and have served our country and fought for our democracy. I will also immediately put in place a meaningful process for reviewing the cases for asylum. I will release children from cages. I will get rid of the private detention centers. And I will ensure that this microphone that the President of the United States holds in her hand is used in a way that is about reflecting the values of our country and not about locking children up, separating them from their parents. And I have to just say that we have to think about this issue in terms of real people. A mother who pays a coyote to transport her child through their country of origin, through the entire country of Mexico, facing unknown peril to come here. Why would that mother do that? I will tell you. Because she has decided for that child to remain where they are is worse. But what does Donald Trump do? He says, go back to where you came from. That is not reflective of our America and our values, and it's got to end.
Governor Hickenlooper, day one, if you are day one at the White House, how do you respond?
With these children?
Let me get to you in just a second.
I'm sorry.
Governor, day one, thousands of men, women, and children cross the border asking for asylum for a better life. What do you do? Day one, hour one.
Well, certainly the images we've seen this week just compound the emotional impact that the world is judging us by. If you'd ever told me any time in my life that this country would sanction federal agents to take children from the arms of their parents, put them in cages, actually put them up for adoption, in Colorado we call that kidnapping, I would have told you it was unbelievable. And the first thing we have to do is recognize the humanitarian crisis on the border for what it is. We make sure that there are the sufficient facilities in place so that women and children are not separated from their families, the children are with their families. We have to make sure that ICE is completely reformed and they begin looking at their job in a humanitarian way where they're addressing the whole needs of the people that they are engaged with along the border. And we'd have to make sure ultimately that we provide not just shelter, but food, clothing, and access to medical care.
Ms. Williamson.
Yes, what Donald Trump has done to these children, and it's not just in Colorado, Governor, you're right, it is kidnapping, and it's extremely important for us to realize that. If you forcibly take a child from their parents' arms, you are kidnapping them. And if you take a lot of children and you put them in a detainment center, thus inflicting chronic trauma upon them, that's called child abuse. This is collective child abuse. And when this is crime, both of those things are a crime, and if your government does it, that doesn't make it less of a crime. These are state-sponsored crimes.
Congressman.
And what President Trump has done is not only attack these children, not only demonize these immigrants, he is attacking a basic principle of America's moral core. We open our hearts to the stranger. This is extremely important. And it's also important for all of us to remember, and I have great respect for everyone who is on this stage, but we're going to talk about what to do about health care. Well, where have you been, guys? Because if it's not just a matter of a plan, and I haven't heard anybody on this stage who has talked about American foreign policy in Latin America and how we might have, in the last few decades, contributed to something big more.
Senator Gillibrand, what would you do as president with a reality?
Well, one of the worst things about President Trump that he's done to this country is he's torn apart the moral fabric of who we are. When he started separating children at the border from their parents, the fact that 7 children have died in his custody, the fact that dozens of children have been separated from their parents and they have no plan to reunite them. So I would do a few things. First, I would fight for comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship. Second, I would reform how we treat asylum seekers at the border. I would have a community-based treatment center where you're doing it within the communities, where asylum seekers are given lawyers, where there's real immigration judges, not employees of the Attorney General, but appointed for life, and have a community-based system. I would fund border security, but the worst thing President Trump has done is he's diverted the funds away from cross-border terrorism, cross-border human trafficking, drug trafficking, and gun trafficking, and he's given that money to the for-profit prisons. I would not be spending money in for-profit prisons to lock up children and asylum seekers.
We had a very spirited debate on this stage last night on the topic of decriminalization of the border. If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation. Can we keep the hands up so we can see them?
And let's remember, that's not just a theoretical exercise. That criminalization, that is the basis for family separation. You do away with that, it's no longer possible. Of course, it wouldn't be possible anyway in my presidency because it is dead wrong. We got to talk about one other thing, because the Republican Party likes to cloak itself in the language of religion. Now, our party doesn't talk about that as much, largely for a very good reason, which was we are committed to the separation of church and state, and we stand for people of any religion and people of no religion. But we should call out hypocrisy when we see it. And for a party that associates itself with Christianity, to say that it is okay to suggest that God would smile on the division of families at the hands of federal agents, that God would condone putting children in cages, has lost all claim to ever use religious language again.
Vice President, Mr. Vice President, I don't know if you raised your hand or were just asking to speak. Would you decriminalize crossing the border without documents?
The first thing I would do is unite families. I'd surge immediately billions of dollars worth of help to the region immediately. Look, I talk about foreign policy. I'm the guy that got a bipartisan agreement at the very end of the campaign, at the very end of our term, to spend $740 million to deal with the problem. And that was to go to the root cause of why people are leaving in the first place. It was working. We saw, as you know, a net decrease in the number of children who were coming. The crisis was abated. And along came this president. He said he immediately discontinued that. We all talk about these things. I did it. I did it. $740 million. Now look, second thing we have to do. The law now requires the reuniting of those families. We would reunite those families, period. And if not, we put those children in a circumstance where they were safe until we could find their parents. And lastly, the idea that he's in court with his Justice Department saying children in cages do not need a bed, do not need a blanket, do not need a toothbrush. That is outrageous.
Vice President, the Obama-Biden administration was the Obama-Biden administration deported more than 3 million Americans. My question to you is, if an individual is living in the United States of America without documents and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
No.
Depending if they committed a major crime, they should be deported. And the president was left in President Obama, I think, did a heck of a job. To compare him to what this guy's doing is absolutely, I find, close to immoral. But the fact is that, look, we should not be locking people up. We should be making sure we change the circumstance, as we did, why they would leave in the first place. And those who come seeking asylum, we should immediately have the capacity to absorb them, keep them safe until they can be heard.
A 15-second, if you could, if you wish to answer. Should someone who is here without documents, and that is his only offense, should that person be deported?
That person should not be the focus of deportation. We should fundamentally change the way we deal with them.
Senator,
I want to suggest that I agree with a lot of what Kamala just said. And that is, on day one, we take out our executive order pen and we rescind every damn thing on this issue that Trump has done. Number two, picking up on the point that Joe made, we got to look at the root causes. And you have a situation where Honduras, among other things, is a failing state. Massive corruption. You got gangs who are telling families that if a 10-year-old does not join that gang, that family is going to be killed. What we have got to do on day one is invite the presidents and the leadership of Central America and Mexico together. This is a hemispheric problem that we have got to address.
Congressman Swalwell, what do you do?
Day one?
No. If someone is here without documents and that is their only offense, is that person to be deported?
No. That person can be a part of this great American experience. That person can contribute. My congressional district is one of the most diverse in America, and we see the benefits when people contribute and they become a part of the community and they're not in the shadow economy. Day one for me, families are reunited. This president, though, for immigrants, there's nothing he will not do to separate a family, cage a child, or erase their existence by weaponizing the census. And there is nothing that we cannot do in the courts and that I will not do as president to reverse that and to make sure that families always belong together.
Senator Harris.
Well, thank you. I will say, no, absolutely not. They should not be deported. And I actually, this was one of the very few issues with which I disagreed with the administration, with whom I otherwise had a great relationship and a great deal of respect. But on the secure communities issue, I was Attorney General of California. I led the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice, in a state of 40 million people. And on this issue, I disagreed with my president because the policy was to allow deportation of people who, by ICE's own definition, were non-criminals. So as Attorney General and the Chief Law Officer of the state of California, I issued a directive to the sheriffs of my state that they did not have to comply with detainers and instead should make decisions based on the best interest of public safety of their community. Because what I saw, and I was tracking it every day, I was tracking it and saw that parents, people who had not committed a crime, even by ICE's own definition, were being deported. But I have to add a point here. The problem with this kind of policy, and I know it as a prosecutor, I want a rape victim to be able to run in the middle of the street and wave down a police officer and report the crime against her. I want anybody who has been the victim of any real crime to be able to do that and not be afraid that if they do that, they will be deported because the abuser will tell them it is they who is the criminal. It is wrong. It is wrong.
We're going to turn to the issue of trade now, if we can. Last night, we asked the candidates on this stage to name the greatest geopolitical threat facing the U.S. 4 of them mentioned China. U.S. businesses say China steals our intellectual property, and party leaders on both sides accuse China of manipulating their currency to keep the cost of goods artificially low. I'll ask this to Senator Bennett to start off with. How would you stand up to China?
I think that first of all, the biggest the biggest threat to our national security right now is Russia, not China. And second, on China, we've got competition because of what they've done with our election. In China, I think the president's been right to push back on China, but has done it in completely the wrong way. We should mobilize the entire rest of the world, who all have a shared interest in pushing back on China's mercantilist trade policies, and I think we can do that. I'd like to answer the other question before this as well.
You have the time.
When I see these kids at the border, I see my mom because I know she sees herself, because she was separated from her parents for years during the Holocaust in Poland. And for Donald Trump to be doing what he's doing to children and their families at the borders. I say this as somebody who wrote the immigration bill in 2013 that created a pathway to citizenship for 11 million people in this country, that had the most progressive DREAM Act that's ever been conceived, much less passed. It got 68 votes in the Senate, that had $46 billion of border security in it. There was sophisticated 21st century border security, not a medieval wall. And the president has turned the border of the United States into a symbol of nativist hostility that the whole world is looking at, when what we should be represented by is the Statue of Liberty, which has brought my parents to this country to begin with. We need to make a change.
Mr. Yang, let me bring you in on this, on the issue of China. You've expressed a lot of concerns about technology and taking jobs. Are you worried about China? And if so, how would you stand up against it?
Well, I just want to agree that I think Russia is our greatest geopolitical threat, because they've been hacking our democracy successfully, and they've been laughing their asses off about it for the last couple of years. So we should focus on that before we start worrying about other threats. Now, China, they do pirate our intellectual property. It's a massive problem. But the tariffs and the trade war are just punishing businesses and producers and workers on both sides. I met with a farmer in Iowa who said he spent 6 years building up a buying relationship in China that's now disappeared and gone forever. And the beneficiaries have not been American workers or people in China. It's been Southeast Asia and other producers that have then stepped into the void. So we need to crack down on Chinese malfeasance in the trade relationship, but the tariffs and the trade war are the wrong way to go.
All right, Mayor Buttigieg, how would you stand up against China?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we've got to recognize that the China challenge really is a serious one. This is not something to dismiss or wave away. And if you look at what China is doing, they're using technology for the perfection of dictatorship. But their fundamental economic model isn't going to change because of some tariffs. I live in the industrial Midwest. Folks who aren't in the shadow of a factory are somewhere near a soy field where I live. And manufacturers, and especially soy farmers, are hurting. Tariffs are taxes. And Americans are going to pay on average $800 more a year because of these tariffs. Meanwhile, China is investing so that they could soon be able to run circles around us in artificial intelligence. And this president is fixated on the China relationship as if all that mattered was the export balance on dishwashers. We've got a much bigger issue on our hands, but at a moment when their authoritarian model is being held up as an alternative to ours because ours looks so chaotic compared to theirs right now because of our internal divisions. The biggest thing we've got to do is invest in our own domestic competitiveness. If we disinvest in our own infrastructure, education, we are never going to be able to compete. And if we really want to be an alternative, a democratic alternative, we actually have to demonstrate that we care about democratic values at home and around the world.
We've got a good debate so far. We're going to take a quick break here, candidates. When we come back, the questioning continues with our colleagues, Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow. We'll be here much more with our candidates straight ahead.
Okay, it looks like they're going to another break, and just like before, as soon as they come back, I will get it right back to you. It's not even a matter, so just stick with me during the break, okay? Don't run off, don't be 8-second warriors. And if you notice, what I just put on the screen right before it went away was that being gay is not a qualification, is it? Your happy healer's gay, by the way. It is something that is exciting. It'll really motivate a lot of people who've been marginalized and left behind. But it's not a qualification, just like being a woman is not a qualification, or being black is not a qualification, or just like me being a white guy with blue eyes is not a disqualifier. If you are on truth and you are speaking with truth and that the people can respect, understand, and get that truth, well then you ought be heard you all be heard, because right now there's nowhere for you to speak unless you're putting your own words out, and it's very organic, and it's tough to get out in a world where we put greed first. And I'm watching the screen. Keep the faith. I will not let you down. I'll never let you down. That's why I'm running. That's why I hope you're open-minded. That's why after all this is over, then you'll hear some reflection on what we just all heard. That's why if you just stick with me through the election, no matter whom you're for, okay, Trump or any Democrat, then you'll do it in a way that you keep your sanity. Because I'm a happy healer, and I love first, and I love hard, and I do what matters. I am courageous in a moment. The moment of truth is always when the time is of change, and now is that time. Folks, we have got to get in gear. We have got to know that we are not in gear, and we've got to point boldly to the reasons why we have got to change in this country. And right now I see them so clearly. So many people are just so blind of that fact. And they have 2 minutes countdown right now until they'll be back. Clock just came up on the screen. And so what I'll do is I'll put you a little screen next to this one, because I just want you to be all so informed. And because I have that ability and capability, and because while these guys can't even get their words out straight, your people's candidate, that is to say me, your happy healer, is just right here, eager and courageous and ready to serve, however, is humble in that knowledge, is not looking to be your next condescending candidate. In fact, sure, the White House keeping things up, keeping appearances up is just as important as anything else. But if it were just up to me, to be honest, I would just give the White House to the homeless. We have got to make huge strides in putting people first in ways like we have never done before. We have got to break through and show people that they really matter. We haven't been doing it. Not when people are dying on the street, we haven't been doing it. And you know that people are dying on the street. Where I live, I see people dying. It is the reason why I'm running. I cannot live in a world where just we don't value humanity. And I'm a 40-year-old man, and I don't intend on doing nothing about it, you see, because that's what gives me the ability to live a happy life. And that's why they call me the happy healer. Make no mistake about it. Folks, I'm going to put you back on with the program. I'll have plenty of time to talk on breaks and in between, and of course, when it's over. All right, folks, God bless you. I love you as your happy healer. Keep yourself safe and wholesome, and here you are. I guess they're just not...
Back to the Democratic presidential debate from the Arch Center in Miami.
As we continue the questioning, we want to bring in more members of our team.
So let's turn it over to Chuck Todd and Rachel Maddow.
Well, Rachel, I had a dream that we've done this before.
No, this is
didn't
definitely
happen.
the first time.
Definitely first time. Thank you, Lester, Savannah, and Jose. Let's quickly recap the rules one more time. 20 candidates qualified for this first debate. We've heard from 10 of them from last night. We're hearing from 10 more tonight. Breakdown for each night was selected at random. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer direct questions, 30 seconds for follow-ups if necessary.
Because of this large field of candidates, not every person will be able to comment on everything, but the less audience reaction there is, the more time they will all get. Over the course of the next hour, we will hear from all of these candidates, but we are going to begin this hour with Mayor Buttigieg. In the last 5 years, civil rights activists in our country have led a national debate over race and the criminal justice system. Your community of South Bend, Indiana, has recently been in uproar over an officer-involved shooting. The police force in South Bend is now 6% black in a city that is 26% black. Why has that not improved over your 2 terms as mayor?
Because I couldn't get it done. My community is in anguish right now because of an officer-involved shooting. A black man, Eric Logan, killed by a white officer. I'm not allowed to take sides until the investigation comes back. The officer said he was attacked with a knife, but he didn't have his body camera on. It's a mess, and we're hurting. And I could walk you through all of the things that we have done as a community, all of the steps that we took from bias training to de-escalation, but it didn't save the life of Eric Logan. And when I look into his mother's eyes, I have to face the fact that nothing that I say will bring him back. This is an issue that is facing our community and so many communities around the country. And until we move policing out from the shadow of systemic racism, whatever this particular incident teaches us, we will be left with the bigger problem of the fact that there's a wall of mistrust put up one racist act at a time, not just from what's happened in the past, but from what's happening around the country in the present. It threatens the well-being of every community. And I am determined to bring about a day when a white person driving a vehicle and a black person driving a vehicle, when they see a police officer approaching, feels the exact same thing. A feeling not of fear, but of safety. I am determined to bring that day about.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I could ask one question, just because I think...
Governor, I'll give you 30 seconds.
I think that the question they're asking in South Bend, I think in cities across the country, is why has it taken so long? We had a shooting when I first became mayor, 10 years before Ferguson, and the community came together and we created an Office of the Independent Monitor, a Civilian Oversight Commission. We diversified the police force in 2 years. We actually did de-escalation training. I think the real question that America should be asking is why 5 years after Ferguson, every city doesn't have this level of police accountability.
Governor Hickenlooper, thank you.
I've got to respond to that. Look, we've taken so many steps toward police accountability that the FOP just denounced me for too much accountability. We're obviously not there yet. And I accept responsibility for that because I'm in charge.
Policy, you should fire the chief.
So under Indiana law, this will be investigated, and there will be accountability for the officer involved.
But you're the mayor, you should fire the chief if that's the policy and someone died.
All of these issues are extremely important, but there are specifics, there are symptoms, and the underlying cause has to do with deep, deep, deep realms of racial injustice, both in our criminal justice system and in our economic system. And the Democratic Party should be on the side of reparations for slavery for this very reason. I do not believe that the average American is a racist, but the average American is woefully undereducated about the history of race in the United States.
Ms. Williamson, thank you very much.
Vice President Biden, we're going to get to you. Hang on, we're going to get to you.
Stage, I would like to speak on the issue of race.
Senator Harris,
and so what I will say is
if I could preface this, we will give you 30 seconds since we're going to come back to you on this again in just a moment. Go for 30 seconds.
Okay. So, on the issue of race, I couldn't agree more that this is an issue that is still not being talked about truthfully and honestly. There is not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a coworker, who has not been the subject of some form of profiling or discrimination. Growing up, my sister and I had to deal with the neighbor who told us her parents couldn't play with us because we were black. And I will say also that in this campaign, we've also heard, and I'm going to now direct this at Vice President Biden, I do not believe you are a racist. And I agree with you when you commit yourself to the importance of finding common ground. But I also believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, you have been invoked. We are going to give you a chance to respond. Vice President Biden.
mischaracterization of my position across the board. I did not praise racist. That is not true. Number one. Number two, if we want to have this campaign litigated on who supports civil rights and whether I did or not, I'm happy to do that. I was a public defender. I didn't become a prosecutor. I came out and I left a good law firm to become a public defender when in fact my city was in flames because of the assassination of Dr. King. Number one. Number two, as the Vice President of the United States, I work with a man who, in fact, we worked very hard to see to it we dealt with these issues in a major, major way. The fact is that in terms of busing, you would have been able to go to school the same exact way because it was a local decision made by your city council. That's fine. That's one of the things I argued for, that we should be breaking down these lines. But so the bottom line here is, look, everything I've done in my career, I ran because of civil rights. I continue to think we have to make fundamental changes in civil rights. And those civil rights, by the way, include not just only African Americans, but the LGBT community.
But Vice President Biden, do you agree today that you were wrong to oppose busing in America then?
No,
do you agree?
I did not oppose busing in America. What I opposed is busing ordered by the Department of Education. That's what I opposed.
Well, there was a failure of states to integrate public schools in America. I was part of the second class to integrate Berkeley, California public schools almost 2 decades after Brown v. Board of Education.
Because your city council made that decision. It was a local decision.
So that's where the federal government must step in. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That's why we need to pass the Equality Act. That's why we need to pass the ERA, because there are moments in history where states fail to preserve the civil rights of all people.
I have supported the ERA from the very beginning when I ran
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds, because I want to bring other people into this.
I supported the ERA from the very beginning. I'm the guy that extended the Voting Rights Act for 25 years. We got to the place where we got 98 out of 98 votes in the United States Senate doing it. I've also argued very strongly that we, in fact, deal with the notion of denying people access to the ballot box. I agree that everybody, once they, in fact, they should. Anyway, my time's up. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Vice President.
All of these things have
Senator Sanders, I'm going to go to you on this. You said on the day you launched your campaign that voters should focus on what people stand for, not a candidate's race or age or sexual orientation. Many Democrats are very excited by the diversity of this field on this stage and on last night's stage, and the perspective that diversity brings to this contest and to these issues. Are you telling Democratic voters that diversity shouldn't matter when they make this decision?
No, absolutely not. Unlike the Republican Party, we encourage diversity. We believe in diversity. That's what America is about. But in addition to diversity, in terms of having more women, more people from the LGBT community, we also have to do something else. And that is, we have to ask ourselves a simple question. And that, how come today the worker in the middle of our economy is making no more money than he or she made 45 years ago, and that in the last 30 years, the top 1% has seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth? We need a party that is diverse, but we need a party that has the guts to stand up to the powerful special interests who have so much power over the economic and political life of this country.
Senator Gillibrand, I want to give you 30 seconds on this.
Well, first of all, where Bernie left off, we've heard a lot of good ideas on this stage tonight and a lot of plans. But the truth is, until you go to the root of the corruption, the money in politics, the fact that Washington is run by the special interests, you are never going to solve any of these problems. I have the most comprehensive approach that experts agree is the most transformative plan to actually take on political corruption, to get money out of politics through publicly funded elections, to have clean elections. If we do that and get money out of politics, we can guarantee health care as a right, not a privilege. We can deal with institutional racism. We can take on income inequality, and we can take on the corporate corruption that runs Washington.
The first constitutional amendment to do that was introduced by me when I was a young senator.
Thank you, Vice President. We want to shift topics here. Senator Bennett, the next question is for you. On the issue of partisan gridlock, President Obama promised in 2012 that after his reelection, Republicans would want to work with Democrats. Fever would break. That did not happen. Now, Vice President Biden is saying the same thing, that if he is elected in 2020, both parties will want to work together. Should voters believe that somehow if there's a Democratic president in 2021, that gridlock is going to magically disappear?
Gridlock will not magically disappear as long as Mitch McConnell is there, first. Second, that's why it is so important for us to win not just the presidency, to have somebody that can run in all 50 states, but to win the Senate as well. And that's why we have to propose policies that can be supported, like Medicare Act, so that we can build a broad coalition of Americans to overcome broken Washington, D.C. I agree with what Senator Gillibrand was saying. I share a lot of her views. We need to end gerrymandering in Washington. We need to end political gerrymandering in Washington. The court today said they couldn't do anything about it. We need to overturn Citizens United. The court was the one that gave us Citizens United, and the attack on voting rights in Shelby versus Holder is something we need to deal with. All of those things has happened since Vice President Biden was in the Senate. And we face structural problems that we have to overcome with a broad coalition. It's the only way we can do it. We need to root out the corruption in Washington, expand people's right to get to the polls, and I think then we can succeed.
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds. It does sound as if you haven't seen what's been happening in the United States Senate over the last 12 years. It didn't happen. Why?
I have seen what happened. Just since we were vice president, we needed 3 votes to pass an $800 billion recovery act that kept us from going into depression. I got 3 votes changed. We needed to be able to keep the government from shutting down and going bankrupt. I got Mitch McConnell to raise taxes $600 billion by raising the top rate. And as recently as after President got elected, I was able to put together a coalition of the Cures Act that billions of dollars go into cancer research, bipartisan. But sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you just have to go out and beat them. I went into 20 states, over 60 candidates, and guess what? We beat them. We won back the Senate.
Thank you.
Chuck,
Thank you,
the problem with what the Vice President...
30 seconds. Go ahead.
Sometimes you do have to beat him, but the deal that he talked about with Mitch McConnell was a complete victory for the Tea Party. It extended the Bush tax cuts permanently. The Democratic Party had been running against that for 10 years. We lost that economic argument because that deal extended almost all those Bush tax cuts permanently and put in place the mindless cuts that we still are dealing with today that are called the sequester. That was a great deal for Mitch McConnell. It was a terrible deal for America.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator Bennett. Go ahead, 30
Now,
seconds.
the reason why the Trump tax cut had to be passed is because they had to pay back their donors. You heard it. They actually said those words. So the corruption in Washington is real, and it is something that makes every one of the plans we've heard about over the last several months impossible. And I have the most comprehensive approach to do it with clean elections, publicly funded elections. So we restore the power of our democracy into the hands of the voters, not into the Koch brothers. We were talking about issues. Imagine, we're in Florida, imagine the Parkland kids having as much power in our democracy as the Koch brothers or the NRA. Imagine their voices carrying farther and wider than anyone else because their voice is needed.
Senator Gillibrand, I'm trying to get everybody in here.
It's the first thing I'm going to do because nothing else is possible, whether it's education or healthcare or ending institutional racism.
Senator Sanders, I'd like to put a different question to you. Roe versus Wade has been the law of the land since 1973. Now that there is a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, several Republican-controlled states have passed laws to severely restrict or even ban abortion. One of those laws could very well make it to the Supreme Court during your presidency, if you're elected president. What is your plan if Roe is struck down in the court while you're president?
Well, my plan is somebody who believes, for a start, that a woman's right to control her own body is a constitutional right, that government and politicians should not infringe on that right. We will do everything we can to defend our Roe versus Wade. Second of all, let me make a promise here. You ask about litmus test. My litmus test is I will never nominate any justice to the Supreme Court unless that justice is 100% clear he or she will defend Roe v. Wade. Third of all, I do not believe in packing the court. We got a terrible 5-4 majority conservative court right now. But I do believe that constitutionally we have the power to rotate judges to other courts. And that brings in new blood into the Supreme Court, and a majority, I hope, that will understand that a woman has the right to control her own body, and that corporations cannot run the United States of America.
Hold on, I'm going to give you 10 additional seconds, because the question is, what if the court has already overturned Roe, and Roe is gone? All of the things you just described would be to try to preserve Roe. If Roe is gone, what could you do as president to preserve abortion rights?
Well, first of all, let me tell you this. Didn't come up here, but let's face this. Medicare for all guarantees every woman in this country the right to have an abortion if she wants it.
Thank you, Senator.
And can I just address this for a second? And I want to talk directly to America's women and to the men who love them. Women's reproductive rights are under assault by President Trump and the Republican Party. 30 states are trying to overturn Roe v. Wade right now. And it is mind-boggling to me that we are debating this on this stage in 2019 among Democrats, whether women should have access to reproductive rights. I think we have to stop playing defense and start playing offense. But let me tell you one thing about politics, because it goes to the corruption and the deal-making. When the door is closed and the negotiations are made, there are conversations about women's rights, and compromises have been made on our backs. That's how we got to Hyde. That's how the Hyde Amendment was created, a compromise by leaders of both parties. Then we have the ACA. During the ACA negotiation, I had to fight like heck with other women to make sure that contraception wasn't sold down the river or abortion services. And so what we need to know is, imagine this one question. When we beat President Trump, and Mitch McConnell walks into the Oval Office, God forbid, to do negotiations, who do you want, when that door closes, to be sitting behind that desk to fight for women's rights? I have been the fiercest advocate for women's reproductive freedom for over a decade. And I promise you, as president, when that door closes, I will guarantee women's reproductive freedom no matter what.
Thank you. We're moving to climate. We're moving to climate, guys. Senator Harris, I'm addressing you first on this. You live in a state that has been hit by drought, wildfires, flooding. Climate change is a major concern for voters in your state. It's pretty obvious. Obviously, this state as well. Last night, voters heard many of the candidates weigh in on their proposals. Explain specifically what yours is.
Well, first of all, I don't even call it climate change. It's a climate crisis. It represents an existential threat to us as a species. And the fact that we have a president of the United States who has embraced science fiction over science fact will be to our collective peril. I visited, while the embers were smoldering, the wildfires in California. I spoke with firefighters who were in the midst of fighting a fire while their own homes were burning. And on this issue, it is a critical issue that is about what we must do to confront what is immediate and before us right now. That is why I support a Green New Deal. It is why I believe on day one, and as president, will re-enter us in the Paris Agreement, because we have to take these issues seriously. And frankly, we have a president of the United States. We talked about, you asked before, what is the greatest national security threat to the United States? It's Donald Trump. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I agree, climate change represents an existential threat. He denies the science. You want to talk about North Korea, real threat in terms of nuclear arsenal, but what does he do? He embraces Kim Jong-un, a dictator for the sake of a photo op. Putin, you want to talk about
Senator
Russia?
Harris,
he takes the word of the Russian president over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a threat to our democracy and our elections.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
These are the issues that are before us, Chuck.
I hear you. Thank you, Senator Harris. Mayor Buttigieg, in your climate plan, if you're elected president in your first term, how is this going to help farmers impacted by climate change in the Midwest?
Well, the reality is we need to begin adapting right away, but we also can't skip a beat on preventing climate change from getting even worse. It's why we need aggressive and ambitious measures. It's why we need to do a carbon tax and dividend. But I would propose we do it in a way that is rebated out to the American people in a progressive fashion so that most Americans are made more than whole. This isn't theoretical for us in South Bend either. Parts of California on fire. Right here in Florida, they're talking about sea level rise. Well, in Indiana, I had to activate the Emergency Operations Center of our city twice in less than 2 years. First time was a 1,000-year flood, and the next time was a 500-year flood. This is not just happening on the Arctic ice caps. This is happening in the middle of the country, and we've got to be dramatically more aggressive moving forward. Now, here's what very few people talk about. First of all, rural America can be part of the solution instead of being told they're part of the problem. With the right kind of soil management and other kind of investments, rural America could be a huge part of how we get this done. And secondly, we got to look to the leadership of local communities. Those networks of mayors and cities from around the world who have come together, not even waiting for our national governments to catch up. We should have a Pittsburgh summit where we bring them together as well as rejoining the Paris.
Thank you, Mayor Buttigieg.
I want to bring Governor Hickenlooper into this for a moment. Governor, you have said that oil and gas companies should be a part of the solution on climate change. Lots of your colleagues on stage tonight have talked about moving away from fossil fuels entirely. Can oil and gas companies be real partners in this fight?
Well, I share the sense of urgency. I'm a scientist, so I recognize that we're within 10 or 12 years of actually, suffering irreversible damage. But guaranteeing everybody a government job is not going to get us there. Socialism, in that sense, is not the solution. We have to look at what really will make a difference. In Colorado, we're closing a couple of coal plants, replacing them with wind, solar, and batteries, and the monthly bills go down. We're building a network for electric vehicles. We are working with the oil and gas industry, and we created the first methane regulations in the country. Methane is 25 times worse than CO2. And then we've got to get to that last part. The industrial, heavy industry, we haven't seen the plans yet. If you look at the real problem, CO2, the worst polluters in CO2 is China, is the United States, and then it's concrete and its exhalation. And beyond that, I think we've got to recognize that only by bringing people together, businesses, nonprofits, and we can't demonize every business. We've got to bring them together to be part of this thing, because ultimately, if we're not able to do that, we will be doomed to failure. We have no way of doing this without bringing everyone together.
Thank you. Vice President Biden, on the issue of how you do this, Democrats are arguing robustly among themselves about what's the best way to tackle climate change. But if we're honest, many Republicans, including the president, are still not sure if they believe it is even a serious problem. So, are there significant ways you can cut carbon emissions if you have to do it with no support from Congress?
The answer is yes. Number one, in our administration, we built the largest wind farm in the world, the largest solar energy facility in the world. We drove down the competitive price of both of those renewable sources. I would immediately insist that we, in fact, build 500,000 recharging stations throughout the United States of America, working with the governors, mayors, and others, so that we can go to a full electric vehicle future by the year 2020, or by the year 2030. I would make sure that we invested $400 million in new science and technology to be the exporter, not only of the green economy, but economy that can create millions of jobs. But I would immediately join the Paris Climate Accord. I would up the ante in that accord, which it calls for, because we make up 15% of the problem. 85% of the world makes up the rest. And so we have to have someone who knows how to corral the rest of the world, bring them together, and get something done like we did in our administration.
Senator Sanders, I want to give you 30 seconds to follow up, and I'm going to hold you to 30.
Look, the old ways are no longer relevant. The scientists tell us we have 12 years before there is irreparable damage to this planet. This is a global issue. What the President of the United States should do is not deny the reality of climate change, but tell the rest of the world that instead of spending $1.5 trillion on weapons of destruction, let us get together for the common enemy. And that is to transform the world's energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. The future of the planet rests on us doing this.
Before we go, hang on.
Before we leave this topic.
Here's the solution. Pass the torch. Pass the torch to the generation that's going to feel the effects of
Take
climate
on
change.
the fossil
Pass the
fuel
torch to the
industry is the
generation that's
solution.
inventive enough.
Thank you both.
Before we leave this topic, here's something you all want to weigh in on. Hold one moment.
Just-
The Republican Party.
Hold one moment.
Just trust us on
The fact
this.
that somebody
We're
has
gonna-
a younger body doesn't mean you don't have old ideas.
No, we need new
John
ideas.
Kennedy
need real
did
new
not
ideas.
say, John Kennedy did not say, I have a plan to get a man to the moon, and so we're going to do it, and I think we can all work together, and maybe we can get a man on the moon. John Kennedy said, by the end of this decade, we are going to put a man on the moon. Because John Kennedy was back in the day when politics included the people, and included imagination, and included great dreams, and included great plans. And I have had a career not making the political plans, but I have had a career harnessing the inspiration and the motivation and the excitement of people,
Thank you, Ms.
masses of
Williamson.
people. When we know that when we say we are going to turn from a dirty economy
Thank
to a
you.
clean economy, we're going to have a Green New Deal, we're going to create millions of jobs, we're going to do this within the next 12 years because I'm not interested in just winning the next election. We are
Thank you, Ms.
interested in
Williamson.
our grandchildren.
All right, we got to
Then
sneak. We're
it
going to
will happen.
sneak in a break in a minute, but before we go, I'm going to go down the line here, and I'm asking you, please, for one or two words only. All right, please.
Really?
President Obama in his first year wanted to address both healthcare and climate, and he could only get one signature issue accomplished. It was obviously healthcare. He didn't get to do climate change. You may only get one shot, and your first issue that you're going to push, you get one shot that it may be the only thing you get passed. What is that first issue for your presidency? Eric Swalwell, you're first.
For Parkland, for Orlando, for every community affected by gun violence, ending gun violence.
Senator Bennett.
Climate change and the lack of economic mobility Bernie talks about.
Senator Gillibrand.
Passing a family bill of rights that includes a national paid leave plan, universal pre-K, affordable daycare, and making sure that women and
Thank you.
families can thrive in the workplace no matter
All
who
right.
they are.
Oh, I like
Hey,
that.
that was
Okay,
pretty-
I'm
Senator
I'm at
Harris.
it then. So passing a middle class and working families tax cut,
That's one.
DACA, guns.
Okay. I'm giving you credit for the first thing you said, the tax cut. I got you. Senator Sanders, first thing.
The premise that there's only one or two issues out there. This
I'm not saying
country
there's one or
faces
two.
enormous crises.
Senator
we
Sanders.
need a political revolution. People have got to stand up and take on the special interests. We can transform this country.
Fine. Vice President Biden, your first issue, Mr. Vice President.
I think you're so underestimating what Barack Obama did. He's the first man to bring together the entire world, 196 nations, to commit to deal with climate change immediately. So I don't buy that. But the first thing I would do is make sure that we defeat Donald Trump.
Okay.
Period.
Mayor Buttigieg, your first priority, your first issue as president that you were going to block and tackle.
We've got to fix our democracy before it's too late. Get that right. Climate, immigration, taxes, and every other issue gets better.
Mr. Yang.
I would pass a $1,000 freedom dividend for every American adult starting at age 18, which would speed us up on climate change because if you get the boot off of people's throats, they'll focus on climate change much more clearly.
Governor Hickenlooper?
I would do a collaborative approach to climate change, and I would pronounce it well before the election to make sure we don't re-elect the worst president in American history.
And Ms. Williamson
My
with the
first
last
call
word.
is to Prime Minister of New Zealand, who said that her goal is to make New Zealand the place where it's the best place in the world for a child to grow up. And I will tell her girlfriend you were so on, because the United States of America is going to be the best place in the world for a child to grow up.
You know,
we are going
thank
to have
you. You guys were close with the short, at least it was shorter
No, they weren't.
responses.
Not at all.
All right. C minus.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with these candidates right after this.
All right, look at that. So the condescending candidates are taking a little break so you get some time with your people's candidate, and we'll just keep the screen up so you can see where it's going. And they couldn't do what I do. They don't have the brains. They can't process the truth because they're all triggered about every little thing. They can't work in the truth. If they can't see the truth, they can't see the truth. That's the problem. I've come to that conclusion. It's not even a question, because you hear the way they talk, and they're not talking about the biggest issues. We're already in a soft civil war, and the best thing they have for us is just continued disunity. So let me get this straight. If Trump wins, we're going to have the next 2 years and then 4 years beyond that of disunity and fighting. And if the Democrat wins, if it's not me, it'll be the same thing. How is that progress? And how in that atmosphere are we going to be able to get anything done? I'm a realist. I just don't see it to be so. And they'll tell you that my plan is not possible, that I'm just hoping and dreaming too hard. But the truth of it is, I actually believe in American exceptionalism. I just know it's true. I lived it. And I know how bad greed is killing our society from within. It's just so ugly, and it's infecting all of our lives. And I have personal anecdotes that I'm so eager to share in my own lifetime. I am a 40-year-old man, and yes, I am gay, and I know I am well-spoken. However, I don't have the class. I don't have the privilege. And that opportunity exists for people who have that and the money. But now I do believe that with the election of Donald Trump, we can turn it into a good thing. And indeed, we can get somebody there who actually knows the American people and their experience, somebody who has also had that same experience themselves, and they are 1 minute and 40 seconds away. So be prepared for this conversation to get majorly dumbed down. And yes, so there are so many people who just don't understand the truth because they get triggered so easily. And those triggers, they come into your heart. And by the way, they stop you from seeing the truth, because instead of being able to act in the way that you would normally act, but because they know they can trigger you, they only have to say certain things. It's your cues. And at that point, you can't even see the truth. And they do it all the time. They do it every day. They're all guilty of it, the right and the left and in between. And there has to be another way. Somebody that says, I am going to be an honest broker of truth, and I am going to love. I can be dorky in my love indeed. I can be so loving. And you know what? That's just fine, because I don't fear man. I'm doing the right thing. And it's them who that are doing the wrong thing. That's why I can have a clear mind and think so clearly and just see what they're doing to us. I'm just trying to help be one of the truth tellers in a time and period in American society when lives just seem to be so overbearing. I'm going to put you on with our guy here, okay? God bless you guys, and love.
Candidates debate in Miami. We're going to continue the questioning now with Lester in the audience. We are in a second are going to have a question from Lester in the audience, but that was just a fake out.
Can't do what I do.
Let's go. We're going to go to the issue of guns and
Congressman Swalwell. Among this field of candidates, you have a unique position on gun reform. You're proposing that the government should buy back every assault weapon in America, and it should be mandatory. How do you envision that working, especially in states where gun rights are a strong flashpoint?
Keep your pistols, keep your rifles, keep your shotguns, but we can take the most dangerous weapons from the most dangerous people. We have the NRA on the ropes because of the moms, because of the Brady Group, because of Giffords, because of March for Our Lives. But I'm the only candidate on this stage calling for a ban and buyback of every single assault weapon in America. I've seen the plans of the other candidates here. They would all leave 15 million assault weapons in our communities. They wouldn't do a single thing to save a single life in Parkland. I'll approach this issue as a prosecutor. I'll approach it as the only person on this stage who has voted and passed background checks, but also as a parent of a generation who sends our children to school where we look at what they're wearing, so we can remember it in case we have to identify them later. A generation who has seen thousands of black children killed in our streets, and a generation who goes to the theater and we actually look where the fire exits are. We don't have to live this way. We must be a country who loves our children more than we love our guns.
Senator Sanders, a Vermont newspaper recently released portions of an interview you gave in 2013 in which you said, quote, "My own view on guns is everything being equal, states should make those decisions."
No.
Has your thinking changed since then? Do you now think there's a federal role to play?
That's a mischaracterization of my thinking.
It's a
Look,
quote of
we
you.
have a gun crisis right now. 40,000 people a year are getting killed. In 1988, Rachel, when it wasn't popular, I ran on a platform of banning assault weapons, and in fact lost that race for Congress. I have a D- voting record from the NRA. And I believe that what we need is comprehensive gun legislation that, among other things, provides universal background. We end the gun show loophole. We end the straw man provision. And I believed in 1988, and I believe today.
Why would you
that
leave
assault
15 million on the streets?
assault weapons are weapons from the military, and that they should not be on the streets of America.
Your plan leaves them on the streets. You leave 15 million on the streets.
We banned the sale, and distribution, and that's what I believe for many years.
Will you buy them back?
If people want to buy, if the government wants to do that, if people want
You're
to
going to be the
back,
government.
yes.
Will you buy them back?
Yes.
Senator Harris, we're going to give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. I think your idea is a great one, Congressman Swalwell, and I will say that there are a lot of great ideas. The problem is Congress has not had the courage to act, which is why when elected President of the United States, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to pull their act together, bring all these good ideas together, and put a bill on my desk for signature. And if they do not, I will take executive action, and I will put in place the most comprehensive background check policy we've had. I will require the ATF to take the licenses of gun dealers who violate the law, and I will ban by executive order the importation of assault weapons. Because I'm going to tell you, as a prosecutor, I have seen more autopsy photographs than I care to tell you. I have hugged more mothers who are the mothers of homicide victims, and I have attended more police officer funerals. It is enough. It is enough. There have been plenty of good ideas from members of the United States Congress. There's been no action. As president, I will take action.
Mayor Buttigieg, I want to bring you in on this, sir. A lot of discussion about assault rifles that are often shorthanded as military-style weapons. You are the only person on this stage tonight with military experience as a veteran of the Afghanistan war. Will military families, does that inform your thinking on this view? Do you believe that military families or America's veterans will, at large, have a different take on this than the other Americans who we've been talking about and who Congressman Swalwell is appealing to with his buyback program?
Yeah, of course, because we trained on some of these kinds of weapons. Look, every part of my life experience informs this. Being the mayor of a city where the worst part of the job is dealing with violence, we lose as many as were lost at Parkland every 2 or 3 years in my city alone. And this is tearing communities apart. If more guns made us safer, we'd be the safest country on earth. It doesn't work that way. And common sense measures like universal background checks can't seem to get delivered by Washington, even when most Republicans, let alone most Americans, agree it's the right thing to do. And as somebody who trained on weapons of war, I can tell you that there are weapons that have absolutely no place in American cities or neighborhoods in peacetime, ever.
Vice President Biden, 30 seconds.
A real 30 seconds?
A real 30 seconds.
Okay. I'm the only person that's beaten the NRA nationally. I'm the guy that got the Brady bill passed, the background checks, number one. Number two, we increased that background check during the Obama-Biden administration. I'm also the only guy that got assault weapons banned, and the number of clips in a gun banned. And so, folks, look, and I would buy back those weapons. We already started talking about that. We try to get it done. I think it can be done, and it should be demanded that we do it, and that's a good expenditure of money. And lastly, we should have smart guns. No gun should be able to be sold unless your biometric measure could pull that trigger. It's within our right to do that. We can do that. Our enemy is the gun manufacturers, not the NRA. the gun manufacturer.
Vice President.
But the NRA is taking orders from the gun manufacturer.
Lester Holt has our next question. Lester, take it away.
All right, Chuck, this is a question from our viewers. We put some suggestions that asked maybe they could share some. Here's one that came from Kathleen from Canby, Oregon, who writes, many fear the current administration has inflicted irrevocable harm on our governing institutions and norms, and in the process, on our reputation abroad. The question is, what do you see as important early steps in reversing the damage done? And we'll put this one to Senator Bennett.
Thank you very much. What an excellent question. First of all, we have to restore our democracy at home. The rest of the world is looking for us for leadership. We have a president who doesn't believe in the rule of law. He doesn't believe in freedom of the press. He doesn't believe in independent judiciary. He believes in the corruption that he's brought to Washington, D.C., and that is what we have to change, and that's why everybody is up here tonight, and I appreciate the fact that they're up here for that reason. Second, we've got to restore the relationships that he's destroyed with our allies, not just in Europe. He flew to the G20 last night and attacked Japan, Germany, and a third ally of ours without saying anything about North Korea or Russia. And when you've got a situation where you have a president who says something happened in the Straits of Hormuz and the whole world doesn't know whether to believe it or not, that is a huge problem when it comes to the national security of the United States of America.
This is a perfect
and we
time.
need to change that.
Thank you, Senator Bennett. It's a perfect time for me to do another one of these down the line. And this is what this question is, which is you're likely going to have to reset a relationship between America and another country or entity if you become president perhaps because of some relationship that you just mentioned about President Trump. What is the first relationship you like to reset as president? I'm going to go down the line, and I'll start with Ms. Williamson.
Well, one of my first phone calls would be to call the European leaders and say, we're back. Because I totally understand how important it is that the United States be part of the Western Alliance.
I'm trying to get one or two words here. I hear you. Governor Hickenlooper.
You know, I talk about constant engagement, and I think the first country I would go to, but I understand they've been cheating and stealing intellectual property, would be China, because if we're going to deal with public health pandemics, if we're going to deal with all the challenges of the globe, we've got to have relationships with everyone.
Mr. Yang, we're trying to squeeze in a couple more things before we go to another break. Mr. Yang.
China, we need to cooperate with them on climate change, AI, and other issues. North Korea.
Thanks for the quickness. Mayor Buttigieg.
We have no idea which of our most important allies he will have pissed off worse between now and then. What we know is that our relationship with the entire world needs to change. And it starts by modeling American values at home.
Okay, Mr. Vice President, I'm trying to be quick.
We know NATO will fall apart if he's elected 4 more years as the single most consequential alliance in the history of the United States.
Senator Sanders.
It's not one country. I think it is rebuilding trust in the United Nations and understand that we can solve conflicts without war, but with diplomacy.
Senator Harris.
All the members of the NATO alliance.
Senator Gillibrand.
President Trump is hell-bent on starting a war with Iran. My first act will be to engage Iran to stabilize the Middle East and make sure we do not start an unwanted, never-ending war.
Senator Bennett, quickly.
Our European allies in every Latin American country that's willing to have a conversation about how to deal with the refugee crisis.
And Congressman Swalwell.
My first act in foreign policy, we're breaking up with Russia and making up with NATO.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We have one last question for Vice President Biden tonight. You have made your decades of experience in foreign policy a pillar of your campaign. But when the time came to say yes or no on one of the most consequential foreign policy decisions of the last century, you voted for the Iraq War. You have since said you regret that vote. But why should voters trust your judgment when it comes to making a decision about taking the country to war the next time?
Because once Bush abused that power, what happened was we got elected after that. I made sure the president turned to me and said, Joe, get our combat troops out of Iraq. I was responsible for getting 150,000 combat troops out of Iraq, and my son was one of them. I also think we should not have combat troops in Afghanistan. It's long overdue. It should end. And thirdly, I believe that you're not going to find anybody who has pulled together more of alliances to deal with what is the real stateless threat out there. We cannot go it alone in terms of dealing with terrorism. So I'd eliminate the act that allowed us to go into war and not the AUMF, and make sure that it can only be used for what its intent was, and that is to go after terrorists, but never do it alone. That's why we have to repair our alliances. We put together 65 countries to make sure we dealt with ISIS in Iraq and other places. That's what I would do. That's what I have done, and I know how to do it.
Senator Sanders, 30
But
seconds.
one of the differences that Joe and I have in our record is Joe voted for that war. I helped lead the opposition to that war, which is a total disaster. Second of all, I helped lead the effort for the first time to utilize the War Powers Act to get the United States out of the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen, which is the most horrific humanitarian disaster on earth. And thirdly, let me be very clear, I will do everything I can to prevent a war with Iran, which would be far worse than disastrous war with Iraq.
Senator Sanders, thank you.
All right, guys.
Informed consent of the American people.
Good news is you get more time to talk, but I have to sneak in one more break. We will be right back with more debate.
Awesome. So yeah, that is the. I was just saying that, and I do have no idea, just like you, of when they're going to go into a break. But we are watching it, so it's on the screen. You'll be able to see just as I will when it comes back. And they're talking about. They're talking about the crazy world and the many threats that we're facing, and. You know, I worry about that because we're in such division right now and we're at each other's throats. We're not focused on that stuff. We can't be. Not in a real way. And if anything were to ever actually happen, we'd be finished, right? We've got imagine if we actually broke out into war in this country. Imagine if the Civil War, that's already a soft civil war, were to turn into a hard civil war. My goodness, all the pain the American people have already been through. I mean, they're the ones who are responsible for this great America we see. That's 25% of the global economy, yet only 5% of the global population. They're trying to grow it on us, though, when there's so many of us that are lacking sustenance. We have to work so hard and toil so hard, 40 to 80 hours a week, just to have sustenance. And that's not fair, because people who are well off, they have their sustenance right off the bat. They can start working on their dreams. If they want to be a monk and just give back to humanity, they are free to do that. And so that's our future. We have to put humanity first so that people can really live out their true fate and to be so much happier. And we have to elect a communicator, somebody who can actually communicate that and unite. And that comes from the people so that can get their respect. And that doesn't rise above the people. I want to be your son. I want to be America's son. I just want to make you proud. I don't want to tell you who you are or what to do. I want you to grow and learn, and for all of us to grow and learn together. And like I said, make you proud. I want to make my mom proud. And so we have about 26 seconds left to the clock. And well, this gentleman speaking, we'll go ahead and put them on and see what they have to say. But of course, I'll be right back here after the debate. They're not quite on the ball like your happy healer, for sure.
From Miami. Now, each candidate will have a final chance to make their case to the voters. 45 seconds each. We begin with Congressman Swalwell.
We can't be a forward-looking party if we look to the past for our leadership. I'm a congressman, but also a father of a 2-year-old and an infant. When I'm not changing diapers, I'm changing Washington. Most of the time, the diapers smell better. I went to Congress at 31, and I found a Washington that doesn't work for people like you and me. It's made of the rich and the disconnected. I was the first in my family to go to college and have student loan debt. And so I have led the effort to elect the next generation of members of Congress. And we have a moment to seize. This is a can-do generation. This is the generation that will end climate chaos. This is the generation that will solve student loan debt. And this is the generation that will say enough is enough and end gun violence. This generation demands bold solutions. That's why I'm running for president.
Congressman, thank you.
Ms. Williamson, 45 seconds for your closing
I'm sorry we haven't talked more tonight about how we're going to beat Donald Trump. I have an idea about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not going to be beaten just by insider politics talk. He's not going to be beaten just by somebody who has plans. He's going to be beaten by somebody who has an idea what this man has done. This man has reached into the psyche of the American people, and he has harnessed fear for political purposes. So, Mr. President, if you're listening, I want you to hear me, please. You have harnessed fear for political purposes, and only love can cast that out. So sir, I have a feeling you know what you're doing. I'm going to harness love for political purposes. I will meet you on that field, and sir, love will win.
Ms. Williamson, thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you. Thank you. My mom and her parents came to the United States to rebuild their shattered lives. In the only country that they could. 300 years before that, my parents' family came searching religious freedom here. The ability for one generation to do better than the next is now severely at risk in the United States, especially among children living in poverty like the ones I used to work for in the Denver public schools. That's why I'm running for president. I've had 2 tough races in Colorado by bringing people together, not by making empty promises. And I believe we need to build a broad coalition of Americans to beat Donald Trump, end the corruption in Washington, and build a new era of American democracy and American opportunity. This is going to be hard to do, but it's what our parents would have expected. It's what our kids deserve. I hope you'll join me in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor Hickenlooper. I'm a small business owner who brought that same scrappy spirit to make Colorado one of the most progressive states in America. We expanded reproductive health to reduce teenage abortion by 64%. We were the first state to legalize marijuana, and we transformed our justice system in the process. We passed universal background checks in a purple state. We got to near universal health care coverage. We attacked climate change with the toughest methane regulations in the country, and for the last 3 years, we've been the #1 economy in America. You don't need big government to do big things. I know that because I'm the one person up here who's actually done the big progressive things everyone else is talking about. If we turn towards socialism, we run the risk of helping to re-elect the worst president in American history.
Thank you, Governor.
Senator Gillibrand, you have the floor for 45 seconds.
Women in America are on fire. We've marched, we've organized, we've run for office, and we've won. But our rights are under attack like never before by President Trump and the Republicans who want to repeal Roe v. Wade, which is why I went to the front lines in Georgia to fight for them. As president, I will take on the fights that no one else will. I stood up to the Pentagon and repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. I've stood up to the banks and voted against the bailout twice. I've stood up to Trump more than any other senator in the U.S. Senate. And I have the most comprehensive approach for getting money out of politics with publicly funded elections to deal with political corruption. Now is not the time to play it safe. Now is not the time to be afraid of firsts. We need a president who will take on the big challenges, even if she stands alone. Join me in fighting for this.
Senator Gillibrand, thank you.
Mr. Yang, you have 45 seconds for your closing.
First, I want to thank everyone who put me on this stage tonight. I am proof that our democracy still works. Democrats and Americans around the country have one question for their nominee, and that is who can beat Donald Trump in 2020? That is the right question. And the right candidate to beat Donald Trump will be solving the problems that got Donald Trump elected, and will have a vision of a trickle-up economy that is already drawing thousands of disaffected Trump voters, conservatives, independents, and libertarians, as well as Democrats and progressives. I am that candidate. I can build a much broader coalition to beat Donald Trump. It is not left. It is not right. It is forward. And that is where I'll take the country in 2020.
Mr. Yang, thank you.
Senator Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, I just want to leave you with a couple of things. One, we need a nominee who has the ability to prosecute the case against 4 more years of Donald Trump, and I will do that. Second, this election is about you. This is about your hopes and your dreams and your fears and what wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's why I have what I call a 3 a.m. agenda. That is about everything from what we need to do to deliver health care to how you will be able to pay the bills by the end of the month. And when I think about what our country needs, I promise you, I will be a president who leads with a sense of dignity, with honesty, speaking the truth, and giving the American family all that they need to get through the end of the month in a way that allows them to prosper. So I hope to earn your support. Please join us at KamalaHarris.org.
Senator, thank you.
Mayor Buttigieg, 45 seconds.
Nothing about politics is theoretical for me. I've had the experience of writing a letter to my family, putting it in an envelope marked just in case, and leaving it where they would know where to find it in case I didn't come back from Afghanistan. I have the experience of being in a marriage that exists by the grace of a single vote on the U.S. Supreme Court. I have the experience of guiding a community where the per capita income was below $20,000 when I took office into a brighter future. I'm running because the decisions we make in the next 3 or 4 years are going to decide how the next 30 or 40 go. And when I get to the current age of the current president in the year 2055, I want to be able to look back on these years and say my generation delivered climate solutions, racial equality, and an end to endless war. Help me deliver that new generation to Washington before it's too late.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, 45 seconds, the floor is yours.
I suspect people all over the country who are watching this debate are saying, these are good people, they have great ideas. But how come nothing really changes? How come for the last 45 years wages have been stagnant for the middle class? How come we have the highest rate of childhood poverty? How come 45 million people still have student debt? How come 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America? And here is the answer. Nothing will change unless we have the guts to take on Wall Street, the insurance industry, the pharmaceutical industry, the military-industrial complex, and the fossil fuel industry. If we don't have the guts to take them on, we'll continue to have plans, we'll continue to have talk, and the rich will get richer, and everybody else will be struggling.
Thank you, Senator.
And lastly, we'll hear from Vice President Biden. Sir, you have 45 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'm ready to lead this country because I think it's important we restore the soul of this nation. This president has ripped it out. It's the only president in our history who has equated racist and white supremacist with ordinary and decent people. He's the only president who has engaged and embraced dictators and thumbed their nose at our allies. I'm secondly running for president because I think we have to restore the backbone of America, the poor and hardworking middle-class people. You can't do that without replacing them with the dignity they once had. Lastly, we got to unite the United States of America as much as anybody says we can. If we do, there's not a single thing the American people can't do. This is the United States of America. We can do anything if we're together. So God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Vice President Biden, thank you.
We want to thank our candidates. We've had 2 nights of spirited debate on a range of issues, 20 candidates in all. We want to thank all of the candidates last night.
Seriously, it takes guts to run and stick your neck out like this to you guys and to the 10 last night.
I would also like to thank the audience for completely ignoring our suggestion not to react. We made it a lot more fun.
Also, thanks to the Democratic National Committee and the Florida Democratic Party.
And of course, thank you to everyone at the Adrienne R. Center for hosting us here and our terrific audience, as Chuck mentioned.
Over terrific.
For Savannah, Jose, Chuck, and Rachel, I'm Lester Holt. Good night, everyone, from Miami.
With you. Thank you for sticking around. And let me get them shut down here. And so they mentioned a couple of things. I want to do my closing now, my 45 seconds. So they all talk about how are we going to beat Trump and that is our major concern moving forward. I could not agree more. That is why it is so imperative that we put somebody forward who gets Trump's voters, who voted with them. I actually am part of that American population that is a Democrat. You wonder who we are sometimes, don't you? We love God, and we're just unbiased, and we just are trying to do the right thing. We can go Republican, we can go Democrat. We're very versatile in the truth. It's that the truth matters. It's that we can't be biased, otherwise we will never get to the truth. And that is why I am running, is because virtually everybody thick and thin, whether you're the President of the United States now or any of the current candidates that are on your screen and in these debates the last 2 nights, they are all too biased to get the job done. They can't deliver. And that is why your people's candidate is here running for President of the United States. So that is my closing. And just to keep it real, that is how my closing would have sounded if I were there. And I really think that we need great people just like your people's candidate, the Happy Healer. And I don't mind calling myself the Happy Healer. This country needs a Happy Healer, doesn't it? Because we are so close to a civil war. Because you matter. You really do matter. You matter to me. That's not fake. Because I tried to live my life separate of caring who and what was going on. It's not for me. I want to be in the human consciousness. I want to be there with you. I want to be in the world. And you know, the fact is, we all want to, but it gets so scary out there and it gets so hateful. And then you got to pick sides. You got to have a safe place, and we all need coping mechanisms. So that's why I say we need a Happy Healer that can help us be courageous in the truth. And that can just also be courageous with us in that truth. Because we can handle anything and we can get to the promised land most certainly, but we have to do it through truth. If we don't apply truth, then it doesn't matter. Anything else that you want to do is rendered void, because you can't even get the cooperation from the Republicans to make what your dreams are happen a reality. And I am your most progressive candidate. I'm going to deliver on a $5,000 stipend for every single American family of 4 every single month, because we can afford it, and that's the bottom floor. That's what tells every single human being that you matter in America, and that your ingenuity and our ancestors' ingenuity and the collective soul of American ingenuity and prosperity has made this uniquely possible for us. And they're not telling that story, are they? They just don't care, and partly they don't even know it. It's so irresponsible to be running for president when you have so many biases that the truth keeps you from seeing that you can't achieve anything that you set out to achieve, no matter the fact that it's many times less than even what I'm setting out to achieve. I am completely confident in my ability to deliver that which I promise, because I know we'll bring the Republicans on board with us, and that as soon as we win the Democratic nomination, this race is essentially over. We're working for the transition at that point, and Trump would know that too. His people are with us because everybody virtually knows we need a better way of doing business in America. That capitalism itself is flawed and it promotes greed. I have my own personal anecdotal stories, even recently, where this is such a time in history where we all have to step up to the plate. I have myself been fielding offers on my home so I can get brave, even more so in the moment, and get to Iowa and start making more of a name for myself. But you go to my website and you see that all the dedication is there, and that the competence is there, and that the experience is there. So important. You have to have insight. And that if you have an ideology that you're so strong about, the thing that should matter the most is that ideology is rooted in truth. And my ideology is rooted in truth and love, because when you need to get the hard work done for the American people, you have to do that in both truth and you have to apply love, because if you do one without the other, it can go really wrong. And that's what they do, is they try and use partials and parts and bits and pieces. They don't want to take on a courageous platform of humanity and say that let's check off the list every item on that for humanity. And sometimes there's multiple truths. There's greater truths. For example, all humanity matters. That's men, women, gay people, black people, Asian people. We all matter. And so that's a great truth, and that's a very strong truth. I would say that would be one of the greatest truths. And then you have, for example, women matter and gay people matter. And, well, yes, we all do individually, but we have all of us as one, because when I see it, and this is what is so important and part of the reason why we have so much racism, you can't have a system of greed and not acknowledge the fact that we have to love and go into a system of love and putting humanity first. And to be able to conquer that, you have to get to the heart of this stuff that I'm talking about right now. Nobody even knows this stuff. They're too triggered. How often do you hear a complete breakdown without any bias of the truth? It's not often, because they're greedy. They're injecting that greed. It's the capitalism that has a certain amount of greed that just comes along with it, no matter how much we love it, and I love it. We all love it, don't we? There's so much about capitalism that we love, but let's face one truth here, if we may, that capitalism can take us. I voted for Trump because I knew he would do what he would do. He would lower the regulations, he would lower the taxes, and that would spur growth and give us this economy we have. And guess what? I'm not the only one. So many other moderates did the same exact thing. Very brilliant. And in fact, that Trump would pave the way for your people's candidate. Before him, it was just stagnation, and the only way to get things done or even think about becoming president is if you had went through a very lengthy process of going to Harvard. It doesn't matter your intellect or your ability. But now all of that has changed. You can actually make a word for yourself if you can convince the American people that you are uniquely placed at that time in history to solve their problems and to be effective. They will reward that. I'm confident, and I put my faith in the American people every time. And that's faith. So the thing that we're missing when we really belittle people of faith that love God, that know that their vigor for life comes from a creator. And I spoke about this more yesterday, and it's on the site, so I'm not going to say much about it other than that really right now. But I encourage you to look into that, specifically how I feel, and respect my opinion. I respect yours, and that I feel there is a creator, and that I am so true in that in my own mind, that it actually makes the world a very magical place for me. I love it. I love the world. I love you. I love everyone in it. And I'm so optimistic about all of us. And that's why I do what I do. That's what drives me, is the passion. In fact, before this, I have the Landy Mantix Brands of Passions, whereas if you don't know, that is basically over 40 different passions. For example, I like flying. I learned to fly. I had my own plane at one point, and I'm a pretty good flyer. And so then I went into the drones, and I flew the drones, and I do very well with those. And all of these different passions, and that's what drives life, and that's what drives love, and that love and passion is a derivative of love, that's where we get the most out of life. And that's where we should all be striving to go with our objectives moving forward, even within the government, because that is life. We have to dial into passions, and we have to have clear plans that actually work for the American people. And when you put value on the human soul, and this goes right back to faith again, there is real value in that, because the religious folks will understand that value. They'll say, oh, okay, that's why. So they don't understand the argument to say, oh, well, we can kill babies, but you want to get everybody health care, and you're saying that that's a moral argument. They're going to call your bluff. That's not a true humanity stance. Remember the greater truths? It goes back to the greater truths. You can't take away one truth like women's rights or gay rights or something like that and place it over the entire humanity. And that's essentially what they're trying to do. It's just another diversion and confusion tactic, and we all fall for it every time. But as soon as you get very focused on what's right for humanity, it comes immediately focused again. And that's why I feel I would be uniquely positioned as a candidate in these times when truth is so scarce. And when everybody is just so worked up, and they're worked up about all the wrong reasons. You know what's more dangerous than just being worked up? But somebody that's so worked up, and they're just so incredibly wrong. Think about that. And there's so many people like that. So just because somebody's so mad and they're red in the face and they're screaming, if that truth doesn't come through your ears and connect with your heart, you know you should be worried. You know you should be thinking about what are their ulterior motives and why are they saying these things? It's not connecting. Think about that. It's so true. And so faith is one of those things that just gives all of us purpose and value in our lives. That makes, and that's why I have in my campaign slogan, because you matter is why I am running, quite simply. And because you matter, and we all matter, and I matter, and my mom who passed away, not having had health care until the final few years of her life, and my brother who died, who never did quite get health care, and my father never got health care, all passed on, all due to reasons that had they had health care, they would just be fine. So I feel your pain. You need a president that's like that gets that kind of pain, you know? And so you just need a normal guy. And sometimes that's really just the right way forward, isn't it? Because everybody else just doesn't experience what we do. They're not experiencing our experiences. They couldn't relate with us if they tried. And they are going to be the ones to solve these issues? Are you kidding yourself, or are you just trying to decide who you want to look at while the country continues to head towards a civil war for the next 2 to 4 and then 8 years? Because to me it feels a lot more like that. I don't like it. I really don't like it, because I know we can have so much better, you know? And so that's why I'm running. That the world is a dangerous place. We have this situation in Iran only getting more dangerous. We have other, like the China. Why would you want to roll back the progress we made with China, even if you don't like Trump? We have to consider where we're doing better and hang on to the progress. Guys, why? Because you matter. You matter more important to get things right than it is to just be spiteful. Yeah, we'll reverse something. We'll reverse healthcare. If it's up to Trump, we're not getting healthcare for all. Ever. They're coming up with a whole another plan. And so that right there is unacceptable. We have got to not just do healthcare for all. We have got to do income for all. We have got to take care of people in a way that they really know they matter. And then they come out with their condescending, oh, look at me, I speak 20 different languages. I know you can't, right? Jeez, get out of here. Do they really think that's going to impress the American people? And apparently some of them do. And, well, I suppose it does impress some people, but it shouldn't, should it? No, sir. It doesn't impress me, because the people are suffering, because they're losing their family, and quite frankly, Marianne, she's a funny one, huh? Marianne sounds like an actress up there. You know, I wouldn't mind to have all of that if it's together with just realness, like your Happy Healer is. To be so completely put on does not inspire confidence when the times matter most. That was my problem with Mayor Pete. He couldn't handle the situation when it happened, could he? Nope. He buckled. We don't need that with somebody running against Trump. That's why you got to put somebody uniquely qualified. There's very few people like your Happy Healer. You know, I seen a ghost. I seen real miracles, and I love God. Well, you know, I'm just a normal guy. The truth is, these are all real pluses about me. The fact that I've been through all these experiences really do make me uniquely qualified, because I don't fear Trump. I know who the real power is. And, you know, and I'm just so loving about that. I love life just as much as the next guy. That's exactly what we need, right there when the time matters most. That is what we need. In fact, anything less than that, and sure, we're going to lose Trump. Absolutely. The man is also courageous. He's got some kind of weird energy about him. And, you know, people are worried about that because he's doing these awful things. And he'll never bring us to the promised land that I'm talking about, the one that you guys know he can do. You just know it. And I'm going to deliver on all of the most, think about it, the most progressive items on the Democratic agenda I deliver on. And I'll get the Republicans. An income for all, health care for all. They can't even say how they're going to pay for Social Security. I'm bringing about a whole new great age of technological advancement. People are afraid of the new advancements. And who are the ones that are stopping that a lot? It's a lot of your religious people, that they're afraid because they think it's going to bring on some kind of bad omen. But the problem is that this is God's plan, and that God is love, and you've got to trust in that. And this is nature happening all around us. We couldn't even stop those forces if we wanted to. And that we see already that technology is stepping up every step of the way, whether we want it or not. And so I would tell my religious brothers, not only is it God's plan, and have faith in God's plan, just like I am a gay man and come as you as such, I am God's creation. You should love and trust in God, certainly in this issue too, because God is love and truth. And we have got to trust, because this is what's going to take us into the new world where we can solve American issues, the pressing times that we are in, where we are out of danger every which way we look, including a danger from within. They don't have these answers for us. They throw us further into problems, into this unity problem that we have. They lie and say they're going to be able to bring people together, but Trump's people will never follow them. Never. I voted for Trump. I know they will never follow them. Trust me on this. They are not going to follow them. And if your candidate is Joe Biden, then you are among some of the people who are most blind, because Joe Biden is so going to be eaten up by Trump's people. They're going to make this a religious war against Joe Biden because of the fact that he touches little kids. And I hate even saying it like that, but and I don't even mean anything too nefarious about it. But that's what they are going to say. You understand what I'm saying? So whether it's true or not, or whether there, whatever other things there are, unless you're prepared for that to happen and to have a general election filled with that, then you should think about that. But all right, I would say that is the truth. We can respect it. I don't even like having to say it, but it is some insight that you might want to consider. What I'd really like to see from Joe Biden is if that he was just a bit more progressive. My goodness, who wants to go back to stagnation? It's like the only good thing Trump ever did was widen the field of the kind of American that could run, and Joe Biden would do exactly the opposite of that. I mean, this is like, guys, come on. I know we're all smarter than this as a collective. I know we can do better. I trust in you. And that's why I'm here, because I do trust. And I want you to go to the website. I want you to learn about what we're doing. These guys aren't caring like that. They're not even in it for the right reasons. They're in it because they want to be your next condescending candidate. That's what I call them. They're just so way up here, and we're just so far down here. And that's just the way they like it. And so they feed us shit like a mushroom. They keep us in the dark. It's just so wrong. It's unconscionable. I have thought long and hard. I am not a perfect man. No. No. Ich spreche Deutsch. Nur ein bisschen Deutsch. Aber entweder das ist noch nicht ein was. Etwas zu magte ich über. Even that is not a reason to vote for me just because I can speak German. Is it? No. It's because we matter. It's because we care. These guys are so condescending. I can't even understand it. I can't even understand it. How do they expect to ever, the people, how can they ever expect to get over racism when you can't admit to yourself that the greed is the problem? Capitalism. We got to tell our friends in business, hey, you want your capitalism to make your billions, that's fine. But the people have done their job now. People are ready. If you don't see it all around us, well, then maybe you're just one of those very dense few who actually need the Civil War. But many of us, we just want to see a peaceful transition into days where humanity is looked after. That's it. You don't see the change around you, then you're blind. It's the reason Trump was elected. It's the reason for all this disunity. And all they can do is continue to lie to us. That's how I know, and that's how other smart people, and that's how you now can recognize, oh, yeah, that makes sense, how that's where we're headed. That's what they're doing. They're just so clever, they think. But when you just clear your mind, it's because we're all so triggered that we fall for it over and over again. So I need to get onto the national stage. And when I do, I can explain these truths, and people just come right with me. It's just so easy to see for me. And I think for any true, honest broker of truth would agree with that. It's just good math. I'm a man of math. I like to look at the numbers. I like to analyze. And as a 40-year-old man, I got started in a very young age in business, and I had to work hard. At the age of 16, I was helping support my mother and to keep my family. My mom had 6 kids. Thank God, because I lost my mom and dad, and I lost one of my brothers. But my mom had 6 kids, and oftentimes we were homeless. It was a tough life, you know. That's why as a Democrat, a lot of us tough people that just rough it out, and that we're white, and that we hear that we have such privilege, it's so hard for us, you know. And then the only love we get is from the other side. And then, but that we agree, we all need to love each other, and that we hold certain values together. But it just feels so blind when we got to say sorry for being white. It just don't feel right. I'm suffering too much for that. And then I've had my drug epidemic myself. So I can surely help you with the drug epidemic we're having in this country. And we need somebody. Drug addicts don't listen to people who's never been through their plight before, who can't possibly understand them, who has never lost anybody to the problem. They can't accept that. But yet here you have so many of these condescending candidates from way up here, so quick and so ready. And Elizabeth Warren, oh, I got a plan for that too. Let me tell you something. No. The smartest people realize that which they don't know. Oh, I come flawed. And for that which I do know, I can explain forwards and backwards, and well, you just know with me, and everybody sees it to be the truth right then. And for the things that I don't know, I seek the knowledge, and you have the peace of mind knowing that a careful person who is looking at the facts, who is considering all matters, is the person who is in charge of the nuclear codes of our foreign relations, who knows just how important it is to keep things safe in America so that we can bring about the great new changes that will actually have hope to solve issues like as if there were a nuclear bomb headed through space and on the way here, that we can with adamant certainty knock it out. And with science we can do that and so much more. We can bring in magic in our time. We can love, and we can be free to love because we're strong. We can do all of that and more. We can inspire the people like they have never been inspired before, and we can bring in the crowds, and we can believe, and we can do, and we can be unleashed. And that is how we get things done. Not with the lies that they're trying to deliver us, not with the stagnation that Joe Biden wants to bring us. People, folks, you want to be careful. You want to be careful stewards of our lives too. That's why you're looking at Biden. But the man is no better. He is lying. He will bring you defeat. He will bring you misery. My words now will be haunting. And I would just say that to the entire country. And that's why I know they would listen. Because the truth is so loud and just so clear. And no, I'm not impressed by the fact that you're gay or Asian or any of those things. I'm just impressed by the truth and by love and by your ability to see past those things. And these guys can't. They simply can't. I used to think they were just 100% about lying and just with nefarious purposes. I couldn't believe that they were in such a position and just couldn't see the truth. I have since come to the conclusion some of them can't see the truth. And these are the people you're putting forth. That's right. These are the people you're pointing to when you point at me and laugh and say that I'm not qualified. That's right. I run in the same footsteps as Kennedy without his education. Had I had the same opportunities as Kennedy. I run in the same footsteps of Obama. I was somebody who was also persecuted for being gay. And I inspire. I know what hard work and ingenuity and dedication and honesty and integrity is. These are not just words. They mean something to us, but somehow or another, they have turned them into just words and everything else. They've taken the color out of our life, and they've replaced it with resentment and hate and broken promises and more broken promises. So that is why your happy healer for president is running. And indeed, because of his pain and because of his qualifications, he calls himself the happy healer, and he is ready. He says, trust in the happy healer. He will deliver. And allow him to be himself. He's somewhat of a dork. If you just allow that to go, I can promise you it'll work. Because when I'm me and you're you and we're all just being who we are, that's when we're at best, at our very best. And we get so much done. And it's all in love. So, folks, I hope you take this opportunity to learn more about your people's candidate. I have so much more to say to you. And I come on every single night at 9 p.m. Tonight, we've been on for quite a bit of time already, haven't we? And we'll continue to come on each night, and we'll continue to deliver the good news of growing this campaign that actually matters and listens and is built of and by and for the people. And in commemoration of Obama and for the path that he helped make to create such a candidacy possible, I see it all fitting that when we fix healthcare and make it for all, that we commemorate his name in that. So go to the site and see how I plan on doing that. Go. It's very special. And we just have to take care of people. And so we're going to set the standard. We're going to unite our religious brothers with everybody else. Science matters. I am somebody who is quite different in that way. I guess that's what I said. I said, I guess I'm just unique at this moment. Such a uniting force. Having voted for Obama, believing in the dream, realizing, experiencing it, having my own pains, going through drug addiction, coming out of that, having built my own business, having at one point, taking care of so many responsibilities and people, helping my mom get off the streets at such a young age, working through Boston Market. Yes, I didn't get to go to school, but yes, I did other things instead, things I had to do for my family, and that I went to school when I could actually. And, well, times are even hard then because I didn't get to do that until after I had done so many other things. And so school and education is a very proactive one. And by the way, I believe, speaking of education, let's talk about that. I believe we should start teaching young and never stop teaching. That is life. And it should be institutional. It should be however you like. It should be as far as you want. Because that is life. That's what we're missing when we're treating each other like we're worker robots. People are so programmed to hear, oh, I want higher wages. Dude, you're not a robot. Excuse me, our parents worked very hard to get the technology we have. With that, we're supposed to come some certain promises, okay? And we're not living it. So we just have to be courageous. And I don't care how you word it. You want to tax the robots? Fine. When you have people that you're taking care of and you put value on the human soul, and you write it into the laws, and so that everybody is getting taken care of. We have health care. We have an income for all. People have money. They can spend it. You watch what happens to the American stock market then. Oh, yes. You watch what happens to the American stock market. We'll be able to solve so many things in the American economy and the GDP. You better watch. Oh, yes. This is based on sound and very, very forward thinking with genius plans in order to work for the American people, because you're able to actually place value on humanity when you do that. And it goes further, because once you dial into all of these technologies that are picking up these jobs, these employers would have otherwise had to have paid out in a paycheck, but now they're paying in taxes to pay for that paycheck. That is their gift to keep capitalism. Go make your billions, you'll make even more, but the American people will be taken care of in the process. Why wouldn't you want that? It is an equalizer. It means the next time you go to get yourself a date, and I'm a single man myself, the first question won't be, what do you do for a living? It's going to change society, trust me. Humanity matters. Very important. So go to the site for me if you would. Check out all of the great things. Our hashtag is HH4US. And also share this if you haven't shared it already. Make sure you like it. And I love you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and take off from here for the night. Make sure you hug somebody. I am your happy healer, and we will see you back at 9 p.m. right here. We're taking it all the way. I am your candidate for president, the people's candidate. God bless and good night.